Okay, part 2.
Will have just enjoyed an amazing dinner, and then you go home and write a review like, this restaurant is fantastic. After an amazing dinner, we ate a delicious dessert. You should definitely spend $6,000 to eat at this restaurant. Honestly, how dare they? I'm just gonna get angrier as it goes, and we're only halfway. Part 11,
Unleash it!
The main selling point of Star Cruiser is meant to be the immersion, or in a broader sense, the choose-your-own-adventure interactivity.
Thank you for the 16 months.
But that could be a little hard to market.
Oh, yeah, so thank you. If you didn't catch the first half, it costs $6K for 2 people for 2. Okay, yeah. If you missed the first half, you don't know what's going on here. Jenny Nicholson paid $6,000 to go to this new great Star Wars hotel that Disney had made, and it has now closed. And this review of hers has gone viral because of, 1, how lengthy it is and how detailed it is, and 2, how absolutely spectacular the failure of this hotel was. $6,000, 2 days, and seemingly everything sucked.
Of the ads focused on 2 activities that happen on the ship.
6K starting price.
Mini-games.
Yeah,
this was a horrible idea because in the promotional material, both of these experiences looked lame as hell. Like, if they were added as a kids' activity to the theme park, free with admission, people would probably think they were cute, but given the infamous price tag on the Star Cruiser, the unanimous reaction was, that's it? So, let's cover both of the activities. First, I'll go over bridge training.
Jugger Bob, thank you for 17 months, and Neozerk, thank you for the gifted.
Everyone does this at least twice. The first one, which is the training session, is already on your schedule before you arrive. A crew member divides you into groups, and you rotate through each of the 4 different control modules. There are gunners, shields, loaders, and engineering. For gunners, obviously, you're going to be shooting at stuff on the big screen.
So you're going to aim, I'm going to fire when you're on the target. How's our thinking process going? It's great.
The screen for this task looks awful. There are so many targeting reticles and random garbage to shoot all over the screen. But this is probably still the most desirable task of the 4 because you do get to game on the big screen.
Wow.
Loaders also work using the big screen, but it's like a crane game where you're trying to grab stuff out of space.
Activate grabbing. Oh, you're flying. I'm grabbing. Ooh.
You work together in a pair, so one person is driving and the other person is rotating and grabbing.
Let's grab, team.
Yes.
Shields have their own display, and I would compare it to Team Pong. Everyone is sliding their shields from left to right to protect the center area from missiles. Even though it's a simple game, I do think the table you play it at is visually cool looking.
Yeah, Haas, what do you have to say for yourself?
In front of you and toggling switches.
Whoa.
Basically, they show certain switch positions on the screen, and you just have to toggle the switches in front of you to match those.
If you have any questions, that is probably the hardest one to do.
Oh.
Jess and Brooke will be walking around, okay? No worries.
Wait, alright.
And then last but not least,
He was just like, you're gonna press buttons. That's the hardest one. Anyway.
Moving on.
Inputting station control screening code.
Okay, what the hell are we doing? Okay, you just push the ones that light up. Mash the lit buttons.
This was definitely the most boringest one. Oh, and at one point during this activity, one chosen kid gets to punch it and send the ship to light speed. I think it's funny how much the marketing made of the punch it moment. Like, we've all always wanted to be told to punch it and then punch it to light speed. And it's like, I don't know if that's true. I think when characters say punch it in the movies, it's memorable and exciting because they're usually in some action scene and you know that they're about to go really fast. Maybe it would feel more thrilling if there was a physical consequence to punching it, like if we were in a really aggressive motion simulator that's going to lurch excitingly, but obviously we are not. It's more like a photo op for the family of the kid who's doing it than like a thing that's actually fun to do. At some point during your training, something goes wrong to make it more exciting, and what that is depends on the time slot you're scheduled in, because remember, every element of the story is running on a common timeline.
We've received a priority alert signal from the Resistance.
Priority alert. That means it's an urgent message or it could be a warning. Yes, we
For 6K, I want a
it sounds like
fucking
sometimes you run into
concussion.
enemy ships and have to defend yourself. Sometimes you get a secret transmission from the Resistance. But I believe the most common thing is that you run into an asteroid field.
Asteroid, we're gonna have to grab them.
going to have to cover it.
Yeah, like I said, I would just
reason I
be in
believe that
the
is
I would be in
all
the
windows in the
restaurant
Star
just
Cruiser are
throwing back
synchronized
those
to one
space
another.
cocktails.
The Imagineers were very proud of this element in the marketing. No matter where you are on the ship, the view out your window will reflect the view outside all the other windows. So, if you're in your room looking out the window, you'll start to notice that approximately every 45 minutes you're in another asteroid field. On the whole, I thought this minigame was pretty fun. Each of the positions plays differently, and I think it's nice that every group gets to try every station. You don't just get stuck at an unfun one and have to stay there. There's definitely a bit of a learning
But the
curve.
cocktails are extra. I don't give a fuck. Just take the rest of my money.
And the cast member walking us through it was like visibly annoyed by how people kept screwing up their instructions, walking to the wrong station, and mashing random buttons. I don't know who was doing that.
One more time, that'll be front to side, side to mid-deck, mid-deck to back down the ramp to the front.
But it's high energy and it doesn't last so long that you get bored with it.
The Porky system.
Quirky. It's time to do a thing in the quirky system.
On day 2, having taught you how to use each of the bridge stations, they bring you back for another story event. Sometimes 2, depending on how your story plays out, because the day 2 bridge
Cop
missions
held
are meant to be
4
specific
drinks.
to your story path.
Yeah, SK does have data
I would just bring out a flask with vodka.
for the survival of the resistance.
Oh my goodness. Look at the alien business.
Oh my god, very different vibes in the different rooms. They don't even know the danger.
Starting to think that maybe spending 10 grand on this would be a waste of
So
money.
if you're
I
on the
don't know,
resistance
just give it
side,
a
you help
minute.
shoot at the First Order blockade. If you're a smuggler, you help grab some cargo to smuggle aboard. Since there's no longer the story pretense of training, it appears on your schedule like, the captain would like to speak to you on the bridge at 3 p.m. Then you tap your band at the door to confirm you're one of the, 30-ish people who unlocked this scene. These later bridge scenes were much more fun because they didn't have to go over logistics anymore. Everyone has already had their demo round, they know how all the stations work, so your captain can just yell, rotate stations, and everyone is ready to jump into the mini games.
You can do it!
As far as the gameplay, I'm sure you've already gathered that it's extremely basic, more primitive than anything you can get on your phone. Like, if this gameplay was just put in an arcade cabinet at a Dave & Buster's, nobody would even want to play it. But obviously, they've dressed it up. You're in a cool spaceship room with a big window into space.
Immersive.
And they've got live actors coming in to impress upon you the stakes of what you're doing.
Resistance starts to analyze the hyperspace tracking system. They can find a way to defeat it.
So with all this in mind, it's fine. People who do it will like
Every
it.
single time she has included video footage from the weekend she went, I swear everyone in that footage looks so bored. Just like, what the hell is going on here?
Get well
Salty
enough.
C,
I don't
thank
think
you
it's
for the
much to
prime.
write home about, but it was a fine enough gameplay element for this kind of experience. And for my sister and I, it was pretty much the only time we got to participate in the story, so we were just excited to be doing something. Okay, next we'll look at lightsabers.
No one is
This was the other one pushed
smiling or
hard in the
laughing
ads.
or having
This training is taught by the Saja.
obvious fun.
Obviously, it's weird that Jedi training, which has largely been framed in the movies as special and spiritual, is now being offered as a cruise ship activity like it's shuffleboard. But there is an official
Smiling
tie-in
costs
comic
extra.
explaining the backstory. You see, when the ship was new, a Jedi Master saved the ship's special compass from this stupid-looking evil cyborg. And the captain at the time was so grateful, he built a lightsaber training pod on board to honor her. It doesn't really make sense, but that's the explanation. So, the Saja will be teaching us beginner lightsaber techniques with the help of a training remote that shoots lasers. Sort of like the one Luke Skywalker used. But obviously, our training remotes don't fly like that.
Read
They're
out, Drew.
just
Thank you for the
attached to
19
wall.
months.
Useless fun fact, not all the Saja, but a lot of the Saja are female brunettes with vaguely Daisy Ridley-esque faces, and I think that's because a lot of them are cross-trained to play Rey. Or at least the Rey that's way up on the balcony in the fight scene. Probably to maximize their use of the actors, since I don't think Rey is there on day one. It might also be to save on costs associated with lightsaber stunt training. Now they can just train one person instead of twice as many. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. There's Reys everywhere. In this activity, everyone gets to try their hands at lightsabering, and there are a couple different rounds to this. In the first round, you're told that a guide light will appear ahead of the laser, so you get a couple seconds to line your lightsaber up with where the laser is going to be. The laser fires, and then the lightsaber vibrates and plays a sound effect as though the laser is actually impacting it. This round is obviously really boring, and that's because in an early leaked patent for this minigame, we can see that this whole first round is simply the calibration phase in disguise. They're very braggadocious about that, like, our game doesn't need calibration before gameplay can begin because we integrate it into the gameplay. And it's like, okay, but did you really? Are we calling this gameplay? Anyway, as is pretty obvious, the computer is leading you through a series of basic positions with your lightsaber so it can learn your dimensions and incorporate it into the next round. When I was doing my first round, I was kind of hopping around from foot to foot, primarily because I had seen that Josh D'Amaro ad and thought he looked so uncool the way he did that, and I didn't want to repeat his mistakes. But then the Saja had to come by and tell me to stop wiggling around so much because I think I was in danger of compromising the calibration. But it all worked out. You'll see in a second. In the second round, the time between the guide light and the laser blast is slightly shorter, so it's marginally harder, but still not overly exciting.
I didn't want to look like that dork-ass loser.
Two people behind the lightsaber wielder using these things. This is a reflective
Penguin
shield
on a drone,
capable
thank you
of
for the 2
blocking
months.
blaster bolts. I think canonically this shield is built using kyber crystals like a lightsaber is. Maybe a whole bunch of kyber crystals because it lights up in different colors. I saw a lot of people saying this has crazy implications for the canon, but I think it doesn't. I don't think they ever say it blocks lightsabers, just lasers, which doesn't seem like a big deal. And this thing is like really heavy and awkward to hold, so I fully understand why Jedi prefer to just carry a lightsaber and deflect blasts with that. That said, the shield is pretty uncool, right? They obviously just incorporated this into the experience.
None of these people will ever be lightsaber
kid do when they're not using the lightsabers. So they're like, two people stand behind them and catch the extra lasers.
And he didn't pay $6,000 to look that cool.
And that doesn't make any sense.
He did it for free.
And I'm crouching around with this big clumsy shield, feeling like a total fool. So eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed something in each round. We have that guide light letting us know where the laser blast is going to hit. But we also have these little sparkles around the training remote. These twinkly lights are divided into quadrants, so while they won't show you exactly where to aim, they do let you know the general direction the blast will go. In the first 2 rounds, these are redundant since we have the guide light. But in the break before the final round, the Saja offers context for these twinkles. She doesn't acknowledge them directly, but she says that those in tune with the Force can sense where blasts are about to come from. So that's what the twinkles are. In canon, they're not something we're meant to be seeing with the naked eye. They are the Force giving us intuition about where to block. At this point, the Saja teaches us a little chant for team morale.
Together, baby.
And then she says she thinks we're ready to rely on the Force to block the beams. So for the final round, the blasts come quickly with no guide light, only those twinkles to guide you. My sister was not paying attention during this explanation, but that's actually good news for me because it gave me additional insight into how the tech works. If you look closely, you'll see the major difference in this final round. In the first 2 rounds, we were trying to aim where the laser would go. But in this final round, the laser is actually tracking us and aiming for our blades. The computer even seems to hold its fire indefinitely until you swing into the correct quadrant. The whole concept with the Force twinkles was just to get us to constrain our blade movements to a smaller area so it would be less visually apparent that the lasers were following us and not the other way around. To an unsuspecting participant, and especially a kid, it'll look like they're doing a great job guessing the precise angle of the laser every time with lightning fast reflexes. Since Lindsay didn't notice the twinkles, she was pinwheeling her blade all over the place, so it was very apparent to me what was going on. You can literally see the lasers correcting midair trying to follow her. So I think conceptually that's a fun gimmick. It allows for some sense of escalation, even if individual guests would not be skilled enough to keep up. It simulates the experience of practicing and improving at something all in under 20 minutes. And I loved our Saja. I thought she was funny and was good at retaining people's names and involving everyone in the experience. Unlike the bridge training, this one you do only once and it's never utilized again. In fact, this is the only time you'll even be holding a lightsaber on board. It's forbidden to walk around with them on the ship, I assume due to paranoia that you'll get overexcited and swing into another guest or break a prop. Even if you buy the $200 ship-exclusive saber in the gift shop, you're only allowed to take it out, stand still to pose for photos, and then you're expected to store it in your room. So I guess you could say that should enhance the novelty of this experience. What about the immersion? But when you imagine being the protagonist in a Star Wars movie, I don't think you're picturing doing target practice. And Disney obviously understands this because they've already done a lightsaber training experience in the theme parks. And in that one, after teaching you some basic training
Is that Kevin
positions, they parade
Costner?
out
No.
a Darth Vader or a Kylo Ren to duel the little kids. This show always reminded me of that scene in Space Jam
Like,
where
wow,
the
is
bad
that what
guys
he
want
did
to
after
imprison
he
Michael Jordan
quit
in the theme park
Yellowstone?
and force him to let kids win at basketball. Anyway, such a story moment wouldn't work in an immersive LARP experience, right? They can't have Kylo Ren showing up every 30 minutes. How would they make it work in the story that any of the guests get to defeat the villain, let alone all of them?
I would
But
destroy
therein
those
lies
kids.
the problem, right? Even in the suspended disbelief of the story, you're still not doing anything
Yeah,
very
no
exciting.
blasters
You're just
in a state
training,
that's
so
open carry.
There's no suspense. It's just a mildly diverting video game demo. If it was free in the theme park and you had to wait 20 minutes to do it, I could see it being reasonably popular, but not something you'd go out of your way to do every time. And just like the bridge training, it doesn't really work as a featured attraction for such an expensive experience. Oh, I should also talk about the engineering bay. That was featured in a lot of the ads too, usually just as a visually interesting backdrop. They never indicated what you would do there, but it looked like it would be something. Before I went, I thought maybe they would schedule groups of 10 or so people at a time to go in there for a story reason, and then it could be like a miniature escape room. Like, you have to gather environmental clues and use those to put the machinery at the correct settings to achieve a goal in the story. And they could have a cast member in the room with you to keep things moving if people got stuck.
We're in the
You
engineering.
guys always bring up the Omegaverse video.
Okay. He's in there. Whoa, what's this?
So I was wrong. Basically, the engineering bay is like an activity area with 10 or so baby-level puzzles. Some are like Simon, where a terminal pings in a certain order and then you replicate it. Some of them have screens showing switches in particular positions and then you have to move them around to match. Sometimes when you succeed at a puzzle, it rewards you by playing a sound effect or making steam shoot out or shutting off an alarm that's been sounding.
Oh my gosh, that's a carbon freezing.
Have you ever seen the Star Wars
But as far
holiday
as I
special?
can tell, there's no story incentive to do any
No.
of that. It's just busy work.
Look in here, it's the core.
Like I said, I'm not a huge Star Wars head. Nothing
Wow, I
against
can
it.
feel it humming. All that power. Whoa, we can go in.
But like, I wouldn't spend money to go to something like that, something like this, even if it didn't suck.
Oh, fix it.
I didn't even know they had a holiday special.
Press those buttons.
What is it, like Christmas?
Whoa.
Even if you fix something, in a couple minutes it'll reset for the next person to play anyway, so you're not really accomplishing anything. I think most people figured that out because every time we went in, it was pretty empty. And we'd see other people our age walking in,
It's
taking a look
legendarily
around,
bad.
and quickly leaving because it wasn't very interesting. The only people sticking around were a couple moms with children under the age of 4 because
not
that's the age demographic whose interest will be held by something like this. Which, it's good to have something for everyone, but at this price point, like, why didn't you just take them to the park by your house if they're
How the
getting
hell
so
did they do
little
a
out of this that
holiday
you're just trying to
special?
keep them distracted? Oh, I should also point out that at foot level, there's this escape hatch which connects the engineering room to the brig.
That's cool. Look, it slides. It's a secret tunnel out of the brig.
It was locked when we saw it. There must have been some story event where one of the characters locked in the brig escaped
Oh my
via this
God.
hatch, so that's fun to imagine, but we weren't part of any storyline that got to use it. I read that it's possible to get summoned to the engineering bay for story events, like you meet Sammy there to save the ship, or the general there to sabotage the ship. So I guess in that case there would be an element of satisfaction, like there's at least the pretense that what you're doing matters. We never got any of those events though, and even if we had happened to go to the engineering room while one was going on, we would have been turned away. When a room is in use for a scheduled story moment, they station someone at the door and make you tap your bracelet, so unless the app verifies you've been invited by a character, you
Has
aren't
a
allowed
2
entry.
out of 10.
Anyway, since we didn't get to do that, the room seemed like kind of a pointless diversion.
Finally.
You're just winging it.
Finally, some levers to pull. I think I'm doing it right.
My impression is that basically you can go to the engineering room outside of exclusive story scenes, but there isn't really a reason to. And while we were on board, I didn't realize that that was the case because I didn't know about those story moments we didn't get. So here again, I was frustrated and at a loss. Like, it really seems like this room is for something, but what? I must be doing something wrong. I had really figured there would be something to discover there, but nope. And there was one last thing I'd loosely call an attraction. A lot of fan pages treated this like a big spoiler, but I think they showed a clip of it in one of the ads anyway. But in the
Yeah, they make it seem like you can move
courtyard,
rocks.
You saw they had all those rocks stacked up in the middle. Well, they had one interactive thing in there. The Saja could select you for force training, and then they had some of the rocks rigged to magnets so you could pull a rock toward you. And sometimes it would knock over all the other piled rocks, which made it look a little more dramatic. I know that sounds really simple, but this is another thing they dressed up with the performers by having like a weirdly intimate interaction with you. I don't know. But anyway, I know this is really simple, but I do think it's a cute idea.
Yeah. Use the force.
feel? I feel amazing.
It obviously didn't happen for us. It didn't happen for most guests. There's no guaranteed way to have this happen. You can't unlock it by doing a certain thing in your gameplay or getting a high enough loyalty score with anyone. It's just something the employees randomly select you for based on vibes. I think they often went for really little kids,
You can't advertise stuff front and center as being a part of the experience when it's not a guarantee. Whether it's something that you have to pay to upgrade or that, one random person is selected, you can't advertise that. You can't be like, oh yeah, come, look at this cool video of like, you get to move rocks with the force.
say boys of all ages or, well-known theme park vloggers. And it seems like maybe 3 guests get to do this per sale date. So while I think it's a cute idea, I do think it's a little frustrating that this is one of the only instances of the set being rigged with an interactive special effect. And by design, the odds of seeing it are extremely slim. Mechanically, it's a basic parlor trick, but if the ship had had a lot of small touches like this happening all the time, the overall effect would have been dazzling. Little things that move, that you feel you're interacting with, but no. Part 12, supplementary activities. These were getting a lot of attention online, so I had better address them, although they were a very small part of the experience. Also, I tried to dress like a Saja for this part. See, I've got the sleeves. They can't all be winners. So on Star Cruiser, there are a handful of filler activities that are basically intended for you to do in your downtime between other activities.
Personal problem.
All of the activities I mentioned in this section are completely optional. They have 0 impact on the story, and you will not be penalized for sitting them out, which most people did. Some of these supplementary activities carried more hidden fees. Like they had model ship building as an activity, but you had to go buy the model ship kit from the gift shop, so I don't really get it. I don't know why you wouldn't just do that when you got home. They had a mixology lesson with the bartender called the Cantina Chronicles, where he would make you non-alcoholic versions of all the specialty drinks and then tell you in-universe lore about all the ingredients.
This drink would reveal if they had true intentions. So they would take a sip right before the deal, and after
5 of these, please.
So sweet, you would actually lose the ability to speak.
Yes.
Like a lot of the drinks had planets of origin in the Star Wars universe, or ingredients were like the eggs of a creature. I know one of them had venom in it, and then they would give you a little eyedropper of antidote to chase it with.
151
Cantina Chronicles was supposed to happen at noon on day 2, and it overlapped with the theme park trip. So I really wanted to.
I'm sorry. Did I miss them saying it's a non-alcoholic? Okay, you know what? Fuck this place.
Go and get all that sweet lore, but it just didn't seem reasonable. But then when I got home, I read online that a lot of guests did go out of their way to try to go to it, and on a lot of the trips, it was just canceled without warning. Like, they would be sitting in the bar looking at their phones, like, shouldn't the bartender be here by now? And then before their very eyes, it would be deleted from the schedule. I would have been so mad if I skipped something else and then that happened, so I guess I'm glad I didn't go to it, but it does sound like it would have been fun if it happened. Later in the life of the Star Cruiser, they modified the Cantina Chronicles to something called Spirits of Adventure, so it was the same thing, but the drinks were all alcoholic, and that version was $49 per person. So it's kind of unfortunate to me that they replaced a free thing with a thing that cost money on this all-inclusive trip. Anyway, then they had free activities, which were more like
at this point,
games.
You're just like
they had one
charge
called
it,
Know
whatever,
Your
put me in
Co-Pilot,
debt.
And to my understanding, that was like a Star Wars version of the Newlywed Game. There are Sabacc card game lessons, and of course that hollow Sabacc table in the lounge. The table is cool because it uses a Pepper's Ghost illusion to make it look like there are holograms of your cards in front of you. They only had this one table,
that
so it was usually
$49 better
occupied
include
with a
a
short
bunch of
line
cocktails.
to use it, like a swing set at recess or something. But I wasn't really trying to waste precious time doing a digital card game anyway, so I was happy just to see it. Later, they ran a Sabacc tournament. I had assumed before going that the Sabacc lessons were there because some smuggler story moment involved playing Sabacc against a character actor. That actually did not happen. The Sabacc is entirely a filler activity, but if you win the tournament, you get a big commission commemorative coin. I wish I had that big coin. It's
There
just
was
not
one
fair.
cocktail
At one
that
point, they
cost
set up an obstacle
5,000.
course in the atrium and had kids race the remote-controlled droids through it. They have Sector Set, which is Space Bingo, and if you win, you get the big coin. And then there are the infamous Ryloth dance lessons, where they teach you moves to the alien pop star's new song. Most of these are lame and not worth the money you've paid to be here, but as I said, most guests will not be doing these activities anyway. The way I see it, the schedule was pretty packed, and it had a lot of awkward 30 to 40 minute gaps between things where it would be hard to really know what to do with yourself, so I think these are to fill those gaps. Even though I was not interested in doing any of these, I had intended to try to make it to most of them to get footage so you could see what they were like. And even with those intentions, I didn't make it to most of them. But I felt like walking past and seeing them happening helped add a little life to the ship. I've never been on a real cruise, but whenever I've seen them on TV, they seem to always have old people doing Pilates by the pool and playing bingo, so I like that they have all this corny fake stuff to make it feel like a real corny cruise. I think that's cute. It was probably expected that most guests wouldn't bother with these, but that's part of why I think it's funny that they actually included them. So for that reason, I think these bonus activities are pretty charming, and they certainly don't take anything away. I'm sorry, because I feel like everyone was waiting for me to throw shade at Space Bingo, but I'm not going to. I think it's cute. Part 13, the schedule.
I think she's
You may have
also
picked
trying
up
to
on it by
find
now,
good
but
things
the Star
about
Cruiser
good
schedule
things
was
to
unrelenting.
have in her review.
Basically, every minute of the day was booked with something, and if you thought the schedule looked full when you arrived, you would soon discover that new things are dropped into it on the fly. Theoretically. You could access it in your app, which you were expected to look at constantly, and most of the things on it were 30 minutes
The
or less, so
fucking
we were
app.
constantly running around. Even among positive reviews, I've seen countless people talk about leaving feeling drained, both physically and emotionally, which, in my opinion, seems like a bad thing. Day 1 of Star Cruiser, you can check in as early as 1 p.m., and the story ends between 10 and 11 p.m. The lounge stays
You
open
shouldn't
until
feel
11,
like you're
and
coming
that might
back
be one
from
of your
war.
only chances to spend time there, so you
Yeah,
might
drained
want to.
financially
And
as
we
well.
stayed up a little later than that so I could get ambient footage of the atrium when it was empty. On day 2, the activity begins as early as 8:40 a.m. But if you really want your money's worth, you ought to eat the themed breakfast, so you should really start your day closer to 8 a.m. God forbid anyone who goes wants to shower between days 1 and 2, wear makeup, do any kind of skincare routine, do their hair in the morning, spend time putting on elaborate themed costumes as Disney has encouraged them to do. God forbid anyone gets to their room at the end of the night and wants to talk to their roommates about what they've experienced thus far. It's just accepted that everybody is going to have a sleep deficit unless there's some kind of automaton that shuffles into their room at night, falls face
Remember,
first onto the bed, goes directly to
$2
sleep,
a minute.
then rises in the same clothes the following morning and shuffles directly out the door again. So if you've gotten up at
This
8
is
a.m.,
like
you
boot
should know that
camp.
day 2 runs all the way until 11 p.m. again. Day 3 is checkout day, and on the sample itinerary it says checkout is at 10, but it actually ended up being earlier than that. They assigned random half-hour slots in which each specific room was meant to leave, which could be hours earlier.
They're like, we have
Ours
the
was actually one of
smuggling
the
luggage
latest groups to
crew.
leave at 9 a.m., but they started
One
knocking on
last
our doors at around
activity.
8 to make sure we were actually awake and getting ready, because they have a really short turnaround to flip the rooms for the next crop of guests at 1. Again, this doesn't feel very luxurious. I don't think I've had this happen at any other hotel I've stayed at ever. Another thing is, I really like themed environments, and even though I didn't find the environments
They know what Star Wars fans are like. No need for showering or makeup.
exceptionally detailed, there were some spaces on the ship I might have liked to hang out in longer.
They're
to
like, that's
absorb
why we
the
gave you the
atmosphere.
shittiest
As I said earlier,
bathrooms.
I thought the lounge was really cool, but I only went in there
You
twice,
don't need
and neither
'em.
occasion exceeded 15 minutes. We always had to guiltily run to it, order a drink, and try to chug it before we had to get up and sprint to the next thing on our itinerary. Because on the Star Cruiser, time is very literally money. So on one of our brief visits to the lounge, we ordered some of the bar food, including the plate of beautiful cheese balls, which I love, the ones that arrived in the cloche full of smoke, and we didn't even get to finish them. If anyone can finish a cheese ball, it's us, but nope, we were already late for lightsaber training, and we had to run there drinks in hand, just like the Jedi of old. I barely even managed to get footage of that space bingo. It was happening literally while we were trying to eat the cheese balls, so I would like stand up and sprint to the other room, film some bingo, and then sprint back and keep shoveling cheese into my mouth. Everything moved at a breakneck pace, and I don't mean that as a compliment. It's not the kind of fast pace that feels thrilling. I would describe it as frantic. And 2 straight days of frantic on what is ostensibly sold as a vacation is not ideal and is very mentally taxing. I think one could have had a decent time hanging out on the ship and soaking up the ambiance and ignoring the gameplay entirely. In fact, I think most adults would happily fall into that category because I think they would surely find the simplicity of the gameplay pretty unstimulating.
Choose your
and whenever
adventure.
the itinerary gets
The
posted
adventurer
anywhere
chooses
online,
no
everybody's
adventure.
first question is like, well, are you allowed to just miss stuff on the schedule? And the answer is technically yes, but practically no. By this I mean you're not in high school. You could have a full schedule on your phone and simply not show up for any of it.
They get to choose who they want to interact with, or they get to choose to sit.
It's incredible.
And watch. So there's so many different ways to engage. You don't have to participate if you don't want to.
And you're
But
immersed
remember,
the
the
entire
immersive roleplay
time.
element was Disney's entire justification for jacking up the price so high. So if you're gonna pay to go and not do the gameplay, you might as well just throw handfuls of cash down your garbage disposal. This is like asking, can you go to your local theater and buy 20 movie tickets only to sit in the lobby for 2 days straight? You probably can, but it would be really weird. But if one goes to the Star Cruiser and does participate in the gameplay, they might be sort of miserable because they'll be running on too little sleep, never have a moment to relax, and not necessarily feel fulfilled by the events they do attend. And of course, there was no transparency about which events might be cool and have some kind of special effect or interactive element, and which events were just short story tableau which you would witness from a middle distance over a sea of other guests' heads, unless they started without you. I personally really like an active vacation. I like a theme park trip, an excursion around a city, a museum, maybe an obstacle course. I'm not a spa person. I'm not a lie by the pool person. I'm not a get in the pool person. I'm not a pool person. I don't like pools. I can't swim. This was a bad example. My point is, I didn't think I would be easily exhausted by an experience like this because I'm usually well prepared to be on my feet and doing exciting things all day on little or no sleep. I mentioned that our cabin was really convenient to the dining room.
That's
And
my
I also mentioned that
nightmare.
I didn't have much of an appetite by dinner
Nightmare
on day 2.
vacation.
And I kind of buried the lead on that. Truthfully, I felt really, really run down by that point in our trip. I actually got up from our table in the middle of dinner and ran back to our room because I thought I was going to throw up. And then when I got to the room, I was like, oh, no, I'm not. That's not what this feeling is. So I just kind of like stood there in our doorway, like enjoying that
passing
the
out.
room was quiet. I thought about taking some Tylenol, but that wasn't what was wrong either. I was just really exhausted. So yeah, instead I just ended up standing in our room for a while and like staring at my own reflection in the mirror of our tiny bathroom, and I gave myself a pep talk like, okay, it's the last night. I can't miss the finale. It's just a few more hours. And then I
Well,
kind of like
you
rallied
can
and
because
went back to dinner.
the
I'm just
poll
glad this
will be
happened on our
blocking it.
second night, so I didn't miss a second of the dinner show on night 1. But anyway, I hope from what I just described, you said to yourself, that sounds like a really weird thing to have happen on a luxury vacation experience, because it is. I have never had that happen before or since, while working, while traveling, anytime. The trip just like broke my body in some unfathomable way. And like, we didn't even utilize every scheduled minute of our trip. We had the latest wake up time on the final day. On day 2, we slept in a little and had a full breakfast. And we didn't even really drink. Like, there were a lot of cocktails I wanted to try because they were themed. But I think I had 2 over the span of the first day and 1 in the afternoon on the second day. And then I just didn't have time for any more. So I think all things considered, we were a little better equipped to handle this than others might have been.
No
and it still
time
ran
to
us
drink
ragged.
on a
I
luxury
really can't imagine
vacation.
trying to do Star Cruiser with little kids, or if you yourself have any health problems. Like, you could, and you could just accept that you were going to miss a lot of things in order to fit in breaks and naps. But there again, if you don't participate in something, you're throwing away $2 per person per minute. So here again, the price becomes an issue. If the hotel was cheap, or even cheaper, it would be way easier to say, just pay for the trip, do what you like, miss what you're not interested in, and you can always come back and do what you missed. But for what it cost, that was an entirely unreasonable suggestion. Part 14, the excursion. So, like many real cruises, this experience has a shore excursion.
Yeah, because like the thing with a cruise ship, okay, you could spend the whole time just laying out on a chair on the deck on the cruise ship having a drink, or you can pick and choose which excursions you want to be on. But the cost of the cruise ship comes from comes from traveling around on a giant boat and all of the amenities that are included with it. The fact that it's a giant fucking cruise liner. But I understand what she's saying here, where she's like, it's so expensive to stay in this hotel. And it's not as if it's like, oh, you're paying luxury prices like you would at a Four Seasons. So yeah, it's going to be expensive. No, you're paying because it's supposed to be this like immersive fucking shit. And so you don't want to miss a moment, even though it's exhausting and also not that fun.
Batu. Batu is the in-universe planet name for Star Wars Land in
Snarter
Hollywood
staying with 8
Studios.
months.
So on day 2, you have an excursion where you take a ship down to the planet. I'm trying to tell you that you take a bus to the theme park. Not to be a hater, but I actually think it's kind of stupid that in the meta-narrative, a luxury cruise line or whatever intentionally go to Batu. In universe, this location is supposed to be a backwater planet ruled by crime lords with blaster holes all over the walls and an active military presence. They try to make an excuse by saying the Halcyon took its maiden voyage here back when the planet was nice, but I don't buy it. I understand that we have to go to Batu because that's what they already built for the theme park, but I personally think it would have been more immersive if they had pretended they were taking us to someplace more touristy, like Naboo or Canto Bight, or maybe even Endor as a reference to the original Star Tours. And then in the story, we could be derailed by a resistance mission, or maybe the ship comes under attack and we're forced to stop in Batu for repairs or parts or something. And the cast members could act all apologetic about the change in route and say things like, if you do decide to go planet-side, please be cautious. This is a very rough planet. I don't know, that just seems more exciting to me, and also like an easier way to tie in gameplay missions. So this was another aspect of our grueling schedule. We were supposed to catch our shuttle to Batu at like 9 a.m. I think they just randomly assigned different times to different cabins to try to keep the line from backing up too much because they only had like a couple buses. But the story hadn't ended until like 11 p.m. the night prior, and we'd gotten to sleep even later, so I wasn't going anywhere at 9 a.m. So this was the only time we just defied the schedule. We slept in a little longer, we got breakfast, and we were like an hour late. And it turned out it didn't matter. In fact, by taking the shuttle at 10 a.m., we were able to walk on with no line. There was a ton of discourse online about the shuttle. Everybody was roasting it because they found out through leaked images of the exterior that the shuttle was a box truck. And I guess there was some perceived indignity in putting high-paying guests in a box truck. To be quite honest, I don't understand that at all, and I think it's kind of stupid. Like, we all knew it wasn't going to be a real spaceship, right? So it was obviously going to be built in some kind of vehicle. So who really cares what kind of vehicle the themed seating area is built inside of? If they had instead scraped the innards out of a school bus or a limousine to build the exact same passenger compartment, would that make any material difference? So no, I couldn't care less that this shuttle was a box
What do you mean it's not a real spaceship?
It's themed to look like a real spaceship. I had heard they'd be using more simulated window tech, but they opted to instead not have any windows. I won't roast them too hard on that because I think having simulated moving windows in a randomly jostling...
I worked on the shuttle design too. It was originally going to be a $20+ million autonomous vehicle, but then the budget was cut. They just used a box truck. They're like, yeah, this is good enough. We'll just tell them it's a spaceship.
Box would probably make everybody puke all over each other. They do have a spaceship sound play and lights flash when the engines kick on, which I thought was kind of cute.
Fucking Haas.
But I'm going to be honest, I was disappointed by the shuttle, and here's why. I had heard from promo materials that it was going to be driven by a droid, which I guess canonically it is, but I had wrongly assumed that we would have a little window through which we would see a sliver of cockpit and then the head of a droid pilot. I wasn't expecting much, probably not a full body figure like they had in Star Tours, but they could have at least done like a head on a stick that could raise and lower and swivel side to side.
No,
we would
no
only
budget.
see a little bit of it from behind anyway, so it wouldn't need that much detail. A good example of this kind of thing is the King Kong ride at Universal Studios. They have animatronic drivers in every truck. Actually, they have a whole cast of different animatronic drivers. They all have different names and different personalities with different dialogue. It's crazy. But no, instead in this shuttle, they have a little square area that looks like it should be a window to a cockpit, but it's opaque and doesn't open. We hear the droid that's driving talking over the comms system, and there's a little plaque indicating that if we could see him, this droid would look like Rex from Star Tours, but we never do see him. It's so sad. I'm sure they logistically could have put a droid in there, and I'm sure some Imagineer suggested it, and then corporate decided they would just rather not spend the money to do it. And that is not an attitude I want them to have for an experience that costs this much. I feel like this is just another one of those relatively small touches that could have gone a long way. Upon arrival, you disembark into this little tunnel that's blocked off for only Star Cruiser guests, and in the tunnel they have a kind of concierge setup, so you can grab free water bottles, and in our case free loaner umbrellas because it was pouring rain.
Oh my god!
Hogan, thank you for the gifted
It's nice that
note.
they gave
Jenny
us
is not in
umbrellas.
chat.
Not so bad. No! No, it's so bad. I know. I'm being rained on so much.
That's that
Cold
Florida
now,
weather.
too. They allot a good chunk of time for the theme park. You're meant to amuse yourself there until around 2 p.m. and the latest you can stay is 4. In that block of time, the buses between the hotel and the theme park run pretty much continuously, so if your family had never been to Star Wars Land,
Classic
you would
Florida.
have flexibility to do all the upcharge experiences like the lightsaber, the droid, the cantina, shopping in general. But that would be a terrible waste of your time given how short the cruise is and how much it costs. I hope no one did that. Our plan was to only go to Batuu for the minimum time necessary to do all the stuff specific to Star Cruiser. The cruise package includes fast passes for the Millennium Falcon ride and the Rise of the Resistance ride, which is like a $20 value each, so that's something. And of course, the shuttle that takes you from the hotel to the park is a unique experience, so we had to leave the cruiser to do all that. This excursion is the first thing that happens on day 2, which means when you wake up, your app has put you on one of the story paths and populated a bunch of corresponding missions for you to complete. 2 of the missions are just to go on the rides. They work them into the story, so basically you get a text from a character on your storyline saying, I need you to report to this location. Scan your credentials at the gate for mission coordinates, by which they mean go to the right entrance and tap your band to use the fast pass that's been preloaded onto there. They've written the rides into every story path, so everybody
mission
gets to
is-
do those no matter who is texting them.
The
If you're a
mission
Star
is
Cruiser
give
guest,
yourself
they
a
give you a special
stomach
pin
ache.
to wear so that employees in the theme park will know you're doing the hotel experience and can theoretically interact with you in character and stuff. I say theoretically because, of course, that just didn't happen.
Yeah,
for
ain't no
us.
way,
And for
ain't
the
no
record,
way
that
that was
shouldn't be those cast
happening.
members' responsibility anyway. They're not getting a performance bump, but I just bring it up because it's another one of those expectation versus reality things. But we were like trying to lean into the idea that things might actually be interactive. So when we went up to the ride at the Fast Pass thing, I was like, Captain
Why? Because
Keevan
they
told
build
me
this
to
as total
report to you.
immersion?
And I did not get the same energy back at all. They were just like, what? Scan your Fast Pass. And so I did, but I felt like an idiot, again, is my point. Anyway, and imagine if you're the First Order.
Yeah, so here's another example of her obviously not blaming the employees, like the performers. She's treating them with a lot of grace. And so for Disney to act as if like, oh, when reviews like this come out, the only people that get hurt are the actors and the performers. It's like, shut the fuck up. You know that's not what she's doing here.
It's like Lieutenant Croy asking you to go spy on the Resistance or something. It doesn't actually matter. Basically, you use your Fast Pass, ride the ride, and text the character saying you did it, and they're just like, good work. Well, they're supposed to say good work. In my case, I got ghosted again.
Like, that's the company's fault, very clearly. It's very clear that's the company's fault.
Wow. It's like she doesn't even care. Does she know how much I just did for her?
The Star Wars cast members of the Disney parks unionized.
But
Let's
you don't
go.
actually do anything. You
Use
don't
the
even actually
Force.
have to go on the ride. Like if it's broken down, you can just text and say you wrote it and they're not going to know. But you also have other missions while you're in the land and these ones are interactive. I think we were offered 3 more missions, but we only did 2. You'll see in a minute. But all the other missions happen entirely in the app. I told you a little bit earlier about the Star Wars Datapad app game, out of which the Star Cruiser experience is built. And I told you about how its primary gameplay involved scanning QR codes on crates. Well, I'm sorry to say that that's what we'll be doing in Batuu today. Just scanning lots of crates. You go to your text in the app and decide what mission you want to do first, and you'll have a text from a character asking you to scan all the crates in a particular location.
We have to find these crates.
It's like kind of here, I think.
Okay.
Oh, look, a scan point.
Ah.
Cool.
Smuggling luggage and scanning crates. Oh.
Analyze.
You scanned the crate. Huh. All these crates.
For variety, some
Wow.
of these QR codes are in sneakier locations, like tucked into a corner or low on the ground. So that was our theme park day. Crawling around on the ground, scanning crates in a torrential downpour.
This is horrible. Oh my god, it's so wet.
Juggling my phone, my camera, and the umbrella, having to tap the wet screen multiple times to get anything done.
It's like a rhythm game. Oh, but my screen is wet. Okay. Yay!
Yeah, that is getting to be a problem.
Yeah.
wet screens.
Especially when the timing matters when you tap your screen.
I should also mention that the umbrellas they loaned us were very cheap and would sometimes randomly spring shut, soaking my electronics and also chomping on my head like a bear trap.
No!
Paid $6K to work in an Amazon warehouse.
Oh my god, no.
It happened to my sister first, and to be quite honest, I thought it was like a skill issue, but then a couple minutes later it happened to me too, and we had 2 different umbrellas, so it was all the umbrellas. Our mission was for the Saja, so they wanted us to scan crates near the lightsaber
Not
shop.
interactive umbrellas.
I'll check my comms. She probably sent me something
Let me check mine.
So we went to the place indicated in the picture on the app, and we scanned every crate, and nothing happened.
Where should we should go somewhere.
I thought I scanned everything.
Yeah, let's get out of here. It's too bad. It's just too bad. No, nothing.
Our foolish mistake is that we read the prompt asking us to scan the crates, and then we opened the scan function, and then we scanned the crates. It turned out we were supposed to read the prompt and then click the tiny question mark in the corner of the window, which looks like it's just a help icon.
Skill
but then
issue.
that actually opens the correct scan feature.
Okay, good. So click on her comms.
Saja?
Yeah. Show map. And then like go to the objective. Question mark. Confirm.
And then we do it again?
And then she texts you again.
Oh
That's so
my
stupid.
god.
See, just repeat it. That is so stupid.
So we have to do the same thing twice?
I feel like we do now. I'm just gonna try scanning one.
So the first time we'd scanned the crates and completed the puzzles and seen what was in them, it had been registering them to the theme park side of the app and not the Star Cruiser side of the app, because it's all one app and the app is horribly designed. So we had to scan all the crates a second time.
This sucks. This sucks.
$6,000. It just keeps
This time,
scanning
when we scanned the last crate, it had a holocron inside, and we got a text from the Saja indicating that we had completed the mission. While we were on our mission, we ran into a family having a totally separate issue in the app. For them, they had successfully gotten to the part of the app that scans the crates correctly, but there was a glitch where the final crate simply wouldn't scan, so they couldn't complete the mission.
Nope.
Huh, maybe it's angle. Here, let me try.
No.
Sometimes if you tilt it at a weird angle, like this.
Can't even scan the fucking crates.
Yeah, it's really not getting it.
Yeah, my Sophia's didn't work either.
That's weird.
They talked to the Star Cruiser concierge, and apparently it was a known iPhone glitch, and the only way around it would have been to borrow a loaner iPad from Disney, but they would have had to start the whole mission over. Their kids were really disappointed and didn't want to do everything over, so they told us they were just going to give up on that mission, which I think is really sad.
Did you finish other missions?
Well, I'm almost done with this whole thing here if I just find wherever this precious cargo is. I did all the main halcyon ones.
Has anything like happened when you finished them, or no?
No.
Okay.
No, what about with you guys?
No. That's what I was asking.
Anyway, at that point, we'd had our fill of scanning crates. We used our Fast Pass for the Millennium Falcon ride, which automatically counted as completing a mission for Hondo Onaka, a character who isn't on the Star Cruiser. but she's the
Android
main
winners
character of the ride. He's from one of the
Android
cartoons.
users stay winning.
And I personally don't like him. That's not related to anything. I just don't like him on the show. Anyway, we were helping him get coaxium, a spaceship fuel. Then we used our Fast Pass for the Rise of the Resistance ride, which is a very fun ride. As I mentioned earlier, that one automatically counted as completing a mission for Captain Kevin. We had another mission in the app from Sammy. He wanted us to steal a TIE fighter, so instead of scanning QR codes on crates and doing phone puzzles, we would have been linking to the Bluetooth and control panels and doing phone puzzles. And we had another mission from Lenka Mock, but I don't know what she wanted. I didn't open the text thread. At this point, we've been in the park getting rained
Some
on
say
for
that
hours,
they're
and we
still
were
there
over
trying
it,
to
so
scan
we went back
crates.
early and changed into dry clothes and had a glorious buffet lunch. But in the interest of fairness, I watched a bunch of vlogs to see what the other missions we didn't get would have been like. And long story short, they were all roughly as boring as the one we did. On one hand, that's good because it means we weren't cursed to have the one boring mission. But on the other hand, that's sad because every mission was the boring mission. I heard there was
one of the missions was they package up items and then mail them out to people.
At least one mission that sends you to the cantina to collect a message from the barkeeper, and that sounded a little interesting because the cantina is a cool place with a robot inside. And they built the cantina really small to cut costs.
Wait,
so
you know what this reminds me of? Okay, this is the second time I have referenced Nathan For You watching this video. But this reminds me of the Nathan For You episode when he is helping a guy who has a moving company, and he turns it into a workout. I can't remember what it's called, but he gets people to move items for this moving company by pretending that, is this it? Hold on. I got chattering now. Thing. We're gonna get back to the video, but that is what was going on here. Smuggling luggage, scanning crates. What were the other activities I need to know?
Can't get in there without booking a reservation months in advance. But I found this vlog where they got the cantina mission. Lenka Mock texted saying, go to the cantina and show them this message to receive information from Olga. Olga is the alien bartender. She's like an off-screen character. Like, there was a ton of concept art to do like an animatronic or maybe a walk-around suit, but then Disney cheaped out at the last minute, so now you just hear about her.
That's her office right up there. Okay. She can see me, every move I make, so you can trust me.
So this group goes to the cantina and they show the text at the door.
I think that we're going to be able to get inside Olga's cantina. Okay, we were not allowed to go in the cantina, but the host out front gave us this with the code on the back that you scan.
Yeah, it turns out that because they don't have a reservation, they're not allowed to go inside.
Everything on this project was half-baked. The project was literally canceled just after the foundation for the hotel was poured, and they decided to try and finish it on like a quarter of the original budget. You're fucking kidding. I mean, this is not surprising at all, but it is disgusting. It is absolutely criminal that is what happened, and yet they still charge these prices, and we're just trying to tack on anything additional. It's like, oh, you want pictures? Yeah, you gotta pay for that too. Oh, you gotta pay for this too. You gotta pay for this too. Oh my God, I cannot believe they had poured the foundation for the hotel and then canceled this shit because they knew it was ass. It was originally designed to be so much more than it ended up being. Not surprising. As you watch this review, where basically she goes through every single moment of this hotel experience, you can see that is what happened here. That they very clearly did not roll out, they did not launch this hotel in the way that it had probably initially been designed and planned because of budget.
Person at the host stand just hands them a coaster with yet another QR code to scan, and that completes the cantina task. Where is the immersion? There's so much stuff like that. Like, this guy gets a task to shut down the engine outside of Ronto Roasters. This is a food counter with pork wraps, and for theming, they have a spit of meat turning under a repurposed pod racer engine. The engine plays engine sounds and flickers red lights, so it looks like it's real. So he's been tasked with shutting it down. What a simple effect.
They decided to give the operations team a chance to see if they could make it work.
Effects. It's not very complex, but at least it's microscopically better than scanning crates, and it feels good to feel like you've affected something in the physical environment. But when this guy does it, the app tells him he's succeeded in shutting the engine down, and it doesn't even shut down.
Shut down the engine. We did it. Looks like it's still going to me, but I'll tell it that I shut it down. Finally, some peace and quiet. That's what they said.
Would have gotten my money back on this shit.
But whether or not you do them determines which cutscenes you unlock when you return to the ship that evening. Theoretically. We saw that reflected in one case. We completed the crate scanning mission for the Saja, so we got summoned to the lightsaber training pod to meet with Rey. She showed us a holocron and then was like, did any of you guys scan a crate with this in it? And then a bunch of people were like, yeah, because obviously 1 million people got the exact same crate scanning mission that we did.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So many of you, thank you.
But some people didn't say yeah because they'd seemingly just been dropped into the scene at random. So maybe it didn't even matter that we had done that mission. Maybe it was that broken clock thing I was talking about earlier, where it was just a coincidence that something we had done happened to align with something that happened later. Especially because that was the only time that happened for us the whole trip. Anyway, in this scene, Rey opens the holocron and a hologram of Yoda comes out.
Greetings. Open this, you have.
Oh my God.
To the naked eye, this effect looked really good. I knew it had something to do with these smooshed-looking Yodas on the ceiling angled inward, which is why I filmed them, but I didn't know in the moment how they were pulling it off. Apparently, the effect works like one of those LED alarm clocks. It's a dark room, so you can't see, but on camera, you can see the little metronome arm come up and start swinging. Then Yoda is projected down diagonally from the ceiling so that each of the two halves of the room can see it. I thought that was neat. Like I said, in person it looked very authentic.
May the Force be with you. Always.
A lot of people got this scene. Like, there were a bunch of people in our room, and there was another group watching the scene right before us, and another waiting to watch it right after us. But I'm told not everyone got to see it, just like a third of the people there, so that's a little special, I guess. If we didn't get to see the rock scoot around in the climate simulator, at least we got to see this. So yeah, out of our entire time on the Star Cruiser, that was the only time anything we did in the gameplay even remotely reflected in any story moment ever. That one occasion. Don't get used to it. Our other unlocked scene was the Sammy scene, even though we had elected not to do that mission. He was like, thanks for helping me steal that TIE fighter, guys, but like, we didn't do that. He had asked us to, and we had callously ignored him.
While you're on the two, you saw the first order fighter ship, the TIE Echelon. Listen, it would mean a great deal to me if you would, those who installed that would reveal themselves now. Yes? Wow, thank you so much. I could not have done this without you.
So the Sammy scene was a bridge
Yeah,
mission,
you're
and we got to
welcome.
use all the little arcade game consoles again, so that's fun. But it does kind of highlight another failure of the Choose Your Own Adventure system. In the end, it didn't matter that we had done those missions for Hondo or the Captain, and it didn't matter that we hadn't done the mission for Sammy. The illusion of free will was shattered. If anything, our schedule seemed to be determined by when we were booked for our dinner seating and which scenes had spots left over. And that didn't feel like living my Star Wars story. Part 15, the finale. This chapter contains spoilers for the Galactic Star Cruiser.
Oh, boy.
Or, I mean, more than there have been in other chapters. And I guess you're not going now anyway. Who cares? Why am I saying this? Immediately after dinner on the second night, I got the moment I had been waiting for all weekend. The fake in-story alarm started blaring.
We've lost power. What happened? Wait, is Kylo Ren here?
I see Sammy.
Also, keep in mind, we read her tweet earlier where she says that they have now tried to come back and claim the reason she wasn't included in the story parts was because she had a camera.
We're on auxiliary power. Oh my gosh.
Okay, so just remember you must have
Like, come on. Come on, Disney.
And we were all instructed to go to our muster stations in the atrium. I was so tired, but I was also excited.
This is a ship.
Travelers, get to your muster station. It's not a drill. Keep your whole traveling party together.
Is it bad?
No, it's gonna be okay.
We get to the atrium and find out Lieutenant Croy knows there are Resistance fighters aboard, so he's taking control of the ship. He has his
What if they
stormtroopers
just
haul
started
Sammy
killing
away,
everyone?
and Kylo Ren arrives to torture us.
You'd have
Rey
to pay
comes
extra
to save
for
the
that.
day. They have a big lightsaber fight. There's a lot of back and forth. I will say I was very caught off guard by this one part where Kylo Ren slams poor Rey's head into a banister. They even play like the hollow thump sound effect. I feel like the films were very careful to have him only fight her with the Force and a lightsaber, the more whimsical forms of fighting, presumably because kids' movies are very aware of the optics of a big man putting his hands on a little lady. So I just think it's funny that this concept completely escaped the theme park choreographer. Kylo finds out about Yoda's holocron and tries to take it. Rey gets the upper hand and runs away. This lightsaber fight is where all the budget
At this point,
went.
I'd
It had
be
all the
20
kind of stuff I
space
had been hoping
cocktails
to see
deep,
all
like,
weekend, by which I mean
yeah!
they had used the fact they were purpose building this environment to rig it with special effects that were relevant to the story. They weren't sorcery
Beat
or
her
anything.
fucking
Like you could, for the
ass!
most part, look at the effects and know exactly how they were doing it.
Drinking
but it
my
was still
blue
fun.
milk
Kylo
with
tries to
vodka.
use the Force on us, and they use sound effects and flickering lights to convey this. Rey pulls out the lightsaber they had in all the ads, the one that actually comes up out of the handle, like in the movies. And you can see she's super delicate with it, and immediately sets it down out of sight and switches for the stunt lightsaber that can withstand being whacked into things. But that's fine. fun. The holocron is in the hands of one of the Saja in the crowd below, and then Kylo Ren starts trying to take it with the Force, but then Rey Force pulls it into her hand all the way up on the balcony. This one happened so quick in person that I was like, how did they do that? But near as I can tell, it's a combination of misdirection and a pair of collapsible props. The Saja yells to get your attention, makes a throwing motion toward Rey, and the holocron flattens and goes up their sleeve like the birdcage in the Prestige. Then a sound effect calls our attention back to Rey, who is now holding a holocron, so your brain fills in the blanks and you imagine you've seen it soar into her hand. Enhanced further by the NPCs placed throughout the crowd, who swing their heads in an arc as if they can see it flying. Rey's holocron is also collapsible and it comes out of the railing in front of her. During the lightsaber fight, they have it choreographed so that they hit the banister with their swords at certain points, and at those points in the banister, there are these little spark shooting machines, so it looks like the lightsaber is hitting the metal and sparks are flying. My personal favorite is when Kylo Ren uses a force pull to bring Rey over to him, and they have a little conveyor belt that drags her along the walkway. I just think it's so cute in its simplicity, but everybody was hollering at it.
Key for future Disney immersion experience like this is boofing.
I mean, maybe the reason everyone was so hype is because we had been treated to so few special effects the rest of the time, so we forgot anything like that was on the table.
The bar is non-existent.
One of the biggest effects is when they have this big chandelier fixture at the top of the atrium break out of the ceiling and swing around. But I do think that was one of the only special effects that fell flat because there was too much else going on when it happened. A lot of people seem to not really process it when it's happening or know to look up there. It also doesn't help that, as I said before, Kylo Ren's dialogue is not pre-recorded. They have a real guy talking through a voice changer. And this makes it a little hard to understand what the heck he's saying at all times. So when he starts using the Force in the atrium, he threatens Captain Keevan by saying, "You'll talk when they scream." At least I think that's what he says. I think the idea is that that's the audience's cue to pretend they're being Force tortured and scream. But on our cruise, I think no one understood what he said or what he was doing because I yelled and nobody else did, and it was embarrassing, which is kind of its own form of Force torture.
You talk when they scream.
They had a lot of moments in the finale where some of the characters called out guests by name, which I thought was cute. Like they thanked their allies, or in Croy's case, he kind of playfully roasted guests who had been a nuisance.
I have had help from some of your passengers. And where are you at? And a loyal colleague and terrible spy.
Anne's passed out on blue milk.
Nobody mentioned us, because, you know, none of the characters knew who we were because we didn't get to participate in the game. But I can imagine how it would feel really exciting if that did happen. So that's fun to imagine. I think it also helped that everyone had just had this intense 2-day schedule with many people running on very little sleep and everyone having paid so much money to be there. So it was a very receptive crowd. Everyone was screaming and cheering really loud for everything, which made it way more fun. Anyway, with all that said, I don't actually think these special effects reflect a high enough budget for what they were charging. To be clear, they were cute, and I liked it as a show in a vacuum, but it doesn't at all justify the price tag. But just looking at it as like
I think
a
they
show
should have
that
charged
you might
more,
catch
honestly.
at Disney World in the middle of the day, I did think it was effective and fun to watch. They also had a couple callbacks to earlier in the story. Like at one point in the fight, Rey is struggling, and the Saja have us all yell, "Together as one," to give her our energy, just like we learned in lightsaber training. And there were some good twists, like Rey gets disarmed, suddenly someone shoots at Kylo Ren. It's Chewbacca. Before
The
he leaves,
people
Kylo Ren gives an order
united
to
will
kill us
never
all.
be divided.
Some are loyal to the First Order.
But then one stormtrooper aims directly at Lieutenant Croy. He unmasks, and it's Sammy in disguise. I really appreciated that they found a way to use all these supporting characters in the finale, not just because it's competent writing, but also because it made the staging of the show better. I was right at the front of the room, so I had a great view of all the stuff happening on the balcony, but missed some of the crowd
I don't
moments
even
because
remember
I couldn't
who
see over
Sammy
people's
is.
heads. People in the back of
that's
the
cool.
atrium would have had a more obstructed view of the stuff happening up high, but then they would be excited to have characters and story
What a
moments happening
twist.
right next to them. So I think that was a good equalizer to make sure that no one viewing area felt like a lesser experience. I wish they had considered every show so carefully. So after the lightsaber fight is done and Kylo Ren
One
leaves, we get
side
a long
quest
wrap-up of
guy.
all the supporting characters. Lieutenant Croy sees he's defeated, so he calls his commanding officer and says that there's nothing to report on the Halcyon, so they'll leave us alone. Captain Keevan gives a big speech wherein she awkwardly forgives everybody who helped the First Order, so nobody feels bad that their side lost.
Some of you received and relayed messages from the Resistance, and others aligned themselves very strongly with Lieutenant Croy. Allegiance can be a powerful thing when we feel strongly about a cause. We all think we're doing the right thing, or we wouldn't do it. But right now, the right thing is to come together. We all share one
Send him
Am I
to the
right?
airlock.
Gaia escapes with the sacred stone to return to her people. Sammy is now a hero of the Resistance. Rey intends to bring Yoda's holocron to Leia to bring people hope. I love how awkwardly big the holocron is and how she just casually tucks it under one arm like a basketball. SK has the message from Yoda saved to their memory bank, so they must go with Rey. Lenka Mock is sad to say goodbye, but bids them a fond farewell. I hope this doesn't mean SK, like,
Hey, I
died
scanned
between this hotel
500
and the Rise of Skywalker.
crates, and I
'cause
didn't
it's not
get
like
a
we see them
shout
again.
out.
Where did you put the droid, Rey? This is like when Disney lost my droid. They can't keep getting away
I
with
scanned
this. I
crates
was
for
really
10
tickled that
hours.
Captain Keevan has this moment with the autopilot.
You may be a master of hyperspace, but I need somebody who can move a little quicker. Watch, this one's on you.
My pleasure, Captain.
I guess the ship's autopilot computer also had a narrative arc. Totally missed that one. And this last one is my very favorite. I said earlier that the Imagineers mentioned a romance story on board, and I had assumed that it was between Wraith Cole and Lenka Mock. But I was wrong. So during the finale, Wraith Cole stands up and is like, now that he has learned to believe in himself or whatever, I am signing the guitarist Sandro as my new star act. And he will perform throughout the galaxy with his new girlfriend, Wani.
Sandro and Wani!
Just a random romantic side plot. Everyone's
Yeah,
like,
it turns out all along these two characters had a whole romance plotline going on, which had gone completely over my head. I guess I was too dazzled by Iwani to notice. The captain congratulates us all on a successful voyage. They start projecting a fireworks show outside the space windows and playing Star Wars score, so this is basically the end credits. As everyone is drawn forward into the bridge to watch the fireworks, the characters discreetly make their way out of the atrium, never to return. And the guests are told that a farewell dessert reception awaits in the cafeteria. After the finale, we were so tired and not at all hungry, and I think a lot of people felt the same way because it seemed like a lot of them went directly
Everyone's
back to
just
their rooms.
broken.
But we've gone to and documented everything else we possibly could, and I'm a completionist, so I thought we had better go. You know,
I'm gonna
what
go
if
to the
there are
shame
new
room
menu
one last
items?
time.
What if something cool happens? And it turns out I'm super glad we did. As we were sitting down with our blue popcorn and sci-fi flavored foams, who should appear but the happy couple Sandro and Iwani here to debut their first single.
So we travel quite a distance.
She sings! Who could have known Iwani had the voice of an angel? Not me, because I didn't know she was singing in the Gaia set because I couldn't see her.
This is where we're meant to be. One galaxy.
I loved this performance, and the reception was open seating, like at lunch, so we got to choose our own Star Wars table.
good.
And it just so happened we had picked one with a fantastic view. So even though I had effectively missed the Gaia performance, I did at least get this opportunity to see Iwani play her alien instrument and sing a song, which was what I had most wanted to see the whole trip.
Kith!
Also, the song was very catchy.
They gotta drop that single on Spotify.
Look at
This was
look
such
at these two people right here. Like the one hugging the other. Are they like, wow, we spent our life savings on this weekend?
They gotta drop got that single on Spotify.
They do.
Let's
This was
put
such
some
a
of
good
that
way to
blue
go
milk in
out.
your
the definition
pocket.
of ending on a high note. So yeah, I wouldn't have any improvements to suggest about the finale chunk of the night. That was all really fun. It might have been more meaningful to me if I'd been allowed to engage with any of the story beforehand, but taken in isolation, it felt like a perfectly fun theme park show. Part 16.
Yeah, she's assuring
Cut
him they can get out of the
corners.
crippling
So in
debt.
2006, Disney launched an interactive
It was worth
adventure in
it.
Epcot, the Kim Possible World Showcase Adventure. This attraction would later be rethemed several times to other Disney Channel shows, but that's not important. What's important is the gameplay. Guests borrowed flip phones, because it was 2006, which were programmed to show short video clips leading them through an adventure around the World Showcase. They would look for clues planted throughout the physical environment, and then enter them into the phone to trigger scenes. Sounds would play out of speakers planted throughout the park. Objects would move in the shop windows. One scene flooded with water. Little character figures would pop up along the skyline or in other places that were out of reach to guests. They wouldn't have to worry about them being manhandled or broken or injuring someone, but the ability to affect change in the real world made the gameplay more satisfying. At one point, you would say a code phrase to a cast member and they would hand you a tea bag with the code word on it, because this part of the adventure was set in the tea shop in the England Pavilion. In another mission, you get a golf ball, which you have to drop down a
so
chute.
this was like
Tiny
20
props,
years
which
ago.
Disney doesn't have to worry about you stealing
And it's
or
so
breaking,
much better.
but which make for a more tactile experience. For every iteration of this game, Disney has secured a phone company as a sponsor, but also I doubt the budget was terribly high to begin with anyway. And yet you'll notice that in this game, all these little moving elements were added into an environment which didn't originally have them, and which wasn't even built to accommodate them. They had to go and create props, drain fountains, install all these moving elements to complement the game, and then they had to overhaul it every time the theme of the game changed. A game which is free to play with your park admission. So what I'm saying is I just don't understand why we don't see elements like this in the Star Cruiser. In this case, the entire building, top to bottom, was built with gameplay in mind, and yet, other than some special effects in the finale, the physical environment is so bare, so unaffected by anything you do. No moving pieces, hardly even any interactive screens, no props to use. When you're using your phone, which is most of the game, you're only using your phone.
Amazing when
Nothing in
comedy
the app
from the
is
people in charge
triggering
give
any
a shit.
reaction in the physical world. It might be earning you trust points with the actors, but that's only if it works correctly. And
When they're not like, oh yeah, we already have canceled this venture. We bankrupted this, but we're just gonna see what happens. We're gonna charge people anyway, and I don't know, cross our fingers, and I think it'll be fine.
Sometimes it doesn't. So let's
Slime
look one
bagel
last
thing
time
is
at that
6
Star
months.
Wars Datapad app game, which nobody liked. I played it as soon as they rolled it out in Star
We'll just
Wars
have them
Land,
scan
and I
crates for
remember
like
being
2
so
days.
shocked by how little it utilizes the physical environment. You scan QR codes on crates, static props, and then can't do anything with the digital items inside. You hack panels, but once you do, nothing happens. The app just says, "You did it! You hacked the panel!" As you can see, here I've characterized the app as having a very feeble voice because it's so boring. And the overall gameplay is just earning you imaginary currency to spend on nothing. Sometimes when you hack a panel, the prop you're standing near plays a short sound effect.
Short range antenna used for short range communication. Okay, pressing that, and there is just, yeah, you got to do like a lot of, okay, access granted. It's right up here. This transistor tower should be now transmitting. I think it just did it. Yeah, I think you did it.
That's pretty cool, dude.
Yeah, right there on the app.
Yeah.
And sometimes when they're feeling particularly ambitious, a light blinks on. But that's it. There were several points where I really did get my hopes up that something was
Wow.
going to happen. The app would tell you were hacking a specific prop, like a ship way up on the skyline, or a droid in one of the storage lockers in the shop. It would feel marginally more interactive if, once you completed your task, that distant ship could like lower some flaps on its wings, or the droid could start turning its head around. But they didn't bother doing anything like that.
This is MB12, a BB unit, and now going in here on the app to adjust this. Okay, come on, adjust. There we go. Transmitting. Up. There we go. Okay, it did something.
And despite costing so much more than park entry, the hotel displays a similar lack of effort. It's astounding to me that, for how much the hotel cost, for how ambitious they claim to be, for how long it spent in development, the Galactic Star Cruiser's gameplay wasn't even a lateral move from the Kim Possible World Showcase adventure. It was somehow less. Obviously, I'm not trying to ignore the advancements made here. For example, instead of flip phones, we're now using our own state-of-the-art smartphones. And of course, the environments were pretty, the implementation representation of live actors was refreshing. Uani's animatronic costume
Said,
head was
"Thanks for the
wonderful,
money,
but it often
dickhead."
felt like they were doing the least.
Sucker.
Like, we'll build pretty rooms, but we won't put anything in them. We'll do one droid. We'll build one alien and we'll stop there. My sister told me that when she saw Uani, she was like, oh my god, that's amazing. And that's only the first alien we've seen. Imagine what else they've got. And then they had nothing else. And really, that feels calculated to me. The Star Cruiser feels like it was designed to have just enough cool stuff to put in a TikTok.
We saw Chewie hiding from the First Order and SK, who's the droid on board and the captain of the ship. And then we made our first jump into
Yeah, or because
hyperspace
they
of the
ran out
trip.
of money.
There was drinks
They're like,
and snacks in the lobby, and the captain
one
gave a
alien's
speech.
enough.
Interact with otherworldly characters on board. See scale model of the Halcyon. Dine at the Crown of Corellia.
My Batu missions took me to battle the First Order, stop by Oga's Cantina, and pilot the Millennium Falcon.
And then everyone at home sees that and thinks, think how much more there will be if I go. But they don't realize that that's it. And with all that said, I think it's finally time. I think you're ready now. Let me take you to the cargo hold. That's right. Remember the cargo hold? We still haven't seen what's inside. We'll go there now. Beep, 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 beep. I've just given you access. I didn't get access to the cargo hold until the evening of our last night. And as with all things, it just kind of happened. I didn't earn it. I just realized suddenly that I could go in. But I was very excited. The rooms I'd seen so far had underwhelmed me because I really wanted something to investigate. Everything was too sterile. No room had any hidden depths. You could look around a room in 30 seconds and see everything you needed to. But what more cluttered place is there than a cargo hold? What better place to find lost or hidden things? And the fact that it had taken so long to get access. It must be a grand prize indeed. No spoilers, but I actually had an idea of what it might be. Earlier, I compared the Star Cruiser's room prices to those on a new Disney cruise ship, the Disney Wish. This ship was being built concurrently with the Star Cruiser and had its own Star Wars themed experiences. One of them was a part of the ship's Kid Club, and it was called the Star Wars Cargo Bay.
Let's talk about the Star Wars Cargo Bay. There are critters and creatures.
When did they start building this hotel?
Kids are tasked with taking care of these creatures as they're being transported to Batu.
I think this time we really raised the level of immersion.
At the time of my Star Cruiser visit, the Disney Wish had not yet launched, but I had seen some behind-the-scenes material, and I could see that for the Star Wars Cargo Bay, they were building animatronics of various Star Wars creatures. So now, aboard the Star Cruiser, I had already seen the engineering room, which had turned out to be a simple, kid-friendly minigame. And so I thought, the cargo hold must be something like that. Like maybe there are a bunch of cages with creatures and control panels next to each cage, and you can toggle some switches to refill the critter's water dish or adjust the humidity to make it more comfortable, and they could make the water refill, or they could fill the cage with steam, and then the critter makes a sound to let you know you did a good job and maybe like wiggles a little bit. Those games sound pretty basic, but I love animatronics and I had been hoping to see a lot of them all weekend and had instead seen very few of them. So to me, having a bunch of simple animatronics in cages would have made the room interesting. I thought, if they'll build some for a cruise ship that costs a lot less, surely they'll make some for the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser.
Oh my god. This is so sad. Correct prediction. Animatronic?
There's not even QR codes to scan. It's less than I thought.
Okay, so the cargo hold was basically just a closet. It was just crates. There was nothing to do inside, and physically it was really small. I guess at some point they may have had a story moment in there, like maybe some guests got to meet a character inside for a conversation, but nothing happens in there. It's just a very small room decorated primarily with crates. They did have this one Easter egg.
Oh my god! Wait,
A janitorial closet!
Cameo. It's an ID.
All right,
George
I'll zoom
Lucas
in.
left his ID behind. See, he's in his senator hat. That's
More
his in-phone
crates!
cameo. That's a
More
fun Easter egg.
crates!
I'm not sure what else.
I guess that's impressive in the sense that there were so few Easter eggs in the rest of the ship, but still an extremely sad end to this saga.
Wow, I really thought it was gonna be like an activity. I didn't think it would be that fun, but I thought it would be something.
Part 17. Was it worth it? When it comes to the Galactic Star Cruiser, I've seen a lot of people be really dismissive over the subject of quality and price. Like, they're mad that it's expensive, but then they'll also say things like, who cares if it's bad? It's the new Fire Festival. Everybody dropping that much money on this is a millionaire who deserves to get scammed, etc.
No.
But in my experience, that's not at all the demographic of people who booked the hotel. From what I've encountered personally, most of the people who went were middle-class families who splurged on a trip. Families do that a lot on Disney vacations because these experiences have been successfully established in American culture as a rite of passage, something you have to do at least once before your kid is grown. And that brings an implied deadline. You must find a way to get to Disney World before your child is too old to believe in the magic.
Lucy at 4.5 and you, together for a limited time only. Don't wait to make the memories that will last a lifetime at Disney Parks, the place where dreams come true.
So emotionally, a lot of parents of young kids think, you only live once, kids grow up fast, these years are precious. Let's drain the savings account, max out the credit cards, let's do whatever it takes to make this happen. I acknowledge that these aren't poor families, they're fortunate enough to have savings accounts and lines of credit in the first place, but they're not wealthy, and for many, taking a Disney vacation means taking on a financial burden or risk. Maybe you'll be in a precarious position the next time you have car trouble. Maybe you go into debt to pay for it. Maybe there are just material comforts in your day-to-day life that you sacrifice for a long time to save up. And with that in mind, yeah, it does matter to me emotionally whether the people doing that get their money's worth. Obviously,
I completely agree. And I think like anybody who looks at a situation like this, assuming that every single one of those people are obscenely wealthy, and so it's who cares, rich people, you're kidding yourself. You know, there's a lot of expensive things that people who are not wealthy partake in, but it's supposed to be a special thing. And oftentimes, like, yeah, it's not super financially smart, but it's you've been, bought and sold this idea. And for people with families, like, I don't know. There's the Jim Gaffigan bit where he's talking about Disney, and he's talking about how like awful it is being there, and how miserable it is, how expensive it is. He's like, why do I do it? Because I love my kids. Like I love my children, and I want to give them the experience. And so, if you blame the people, or if you don't see the problem here, then what you're doing is siding with the multi-billion-dollar corporation that has fucked these people over, okay? Are you on the side of Disney, or are you on the side of middle-class folks who spent a lot of money thinking that they were going to have an amazing experience but got ripped off? Like, I'm always going to feel for not the multi-billion-dollar corporation who, keep in mind, around the time that this hotel was being built is when Disney was launching their streaming service, okay? And because of the pandemic and because of the billions that they spent on Disney Plus, well, all of a sudden, Disney has to satisfy their disgruntled stockholders by cutting like $8 billion in costs. And since then have been burning up billions more in operating losses, and it's been a bad time for Disney Plus, and they keep raising prices, and now they're considering they're going to be selling their content to other streaming services, and so they made financial errors, and that came down on the consumer. That's what happened here. Disney fucked up. Disney went, oh, we're in some doo-doo here. And so what they did was they cheapened the experience. They did not deliver on the promises. They screwed over the consumers who spent a lot of money for this very shinily marketed experience. And they deserve to be fucking shamed for that and called out.
Obviously, the Star Cruiser was leagues beyond what even a typical Disney World trip would cost. But I believe that in rolling out the experience, Disney was essentially cashing in decades of goodwill. Disney has always had high prices, but they also have a reputation for quality. This was more than they've ever charged for an experience before, so the logic followed that this would be the greatest experience they've ever offered. Around the time it opened, the number one question I saw everyone ask about the Galactic Star Cruiser was, is it worth it? And after my own trip, I watched a lot of other people's reviews, and I saw that most of them, especially the ones who went for free, seemed to just say, if you have the money, it's worth it. And that answer is so unhelpful and, in my opinion, willfully obtuse. Things have value. Something either costs a fair amount or it doesn't. Like, I'm willing to bet that a lot of middle-class families technically have access to $6,000 in savings or in assets, but they don't want to waste that money. If they spend it, they want to know that they couldn't have had a better value or a better experience doing something else with it instead. Like, okay, I love Taco Bell nachos. I love them so much. At time of filming, those cost a little under $3.
Yoshi, thank you
if
for the
someone asked
bits.
me if they were worth it, I would say yes. Certainly. If tomorrow they suddenly cost $20, I would immediately be able to say, oh, no, they're not worth that. I wouldn't say, well, I really like them, so I suppose if you can afford it, they're worth it. I would say, no, they're worth around $3, maybe up to $5 if I was desperate. Do not spend $20 on those, unless you're watching this in the future, and because of inflation, Taco Bell nachos are now that price. Hello, traveler. I'm so happy you still have Taco Bell. So anyway, I think it's really interesting that a lot of people magically lost their ability to conceptualize value as soon as they were gifted an expensive trip
drop
by
a stack of
big
cash on
company.
a
Listen,
Taco
I know
Bell
you
theme
have to play
park.
nice if you want to stay
Me
on
too.
the PR list, but if you're not using that access to give an honest review, then what's the point of being there at all? What good are you to
Yes,
anybody?
I agree.
Have you no sense of integrity?
Yes.
No self-respect?
Call 'em out,
So,
Jenny.
was it worth it? I've been to many theme parks, many themed experiences, paid for many, specifically Disney theme park themed experiences.
Aquagrit,
I've
thank
been
you
a
for 4
repeat
months.
customer because a lot of the time I do think
Hogan,
it's worth
thank you
what
for the
they're
gifted
charging.
Disney
And I've
Death
come to
Camp.
understand that with Disney, you can always expect to pay inflated prices compared to what you would pay another vendor for a similar product. I can pick something up in a Disney gift shop and usually guess within $1 what overpriced amount they're charging for it. What I'm saying is I understand the Disney price scale. I know the value of specifically Disney experiences. And you better believe I've seen a lot of defenders of the Star Cruiser trying to justify the price. Some of whom went for free, had friends who helped build it, or literally worked there.
While I may have some personal involvement with the Star Cruiser, I
Yeah.
feel I have a responsibility to my amazing followers and this TikTok community to quickly break down what's included so you can...
Nope, fuck these people. Honestly, if something costs this much money and is a scam and is very clearly indicative of a company that had all these grand plans for this very expensive venture and fell apart before they could even roll it out, and yet did so anyway and charged these prices. No, shame on these people, okay? Shame on them. This is grifting. I could never do this. Where it's like, oh yeah, you guys go spend a cool $6,000 for something that sucks. Like that. How do you not have morals? Like what? How much was it? That's on the cheaper level too. You don't have any scruples.
and come to your own conclusion if it's actually worth the price tag.
So anyway, they always try to do an itemized cost breakdown, inflating the value of each item in the column as they go, like comparing the cost of the room to the price of Disney's most luxurious hotels, even though the Star Cruiser rooms aren't nearly as nice.
And a theme park view, because you're getting views of the galaxy and going into hyperspace. So when you do that, and an average of $1,250 per night, that would be a total of $2,500 for both nights on the Halcyon.
Forgetting that hotels charge per night, not per person. Pretending that the character story moments have the same monetary value as 22 hours of consecutive Broadway shows.
The Galactic Star Cruiser is a literal 2-day Broadway show that you become a part of.
Doing the math, because a typical theatrical show is around 2 hours, that's $1,650 you're paying for the live entertainment.
Which, no matter how talented the performers are, is simply not the case. Pretending that you're targeting Ballet Club once is a $200 value,
come on.
even though most guests arrive by taxi anyway. And then after all this, when they still fail to match the lowest possible quoted price for a Star Cruiser trip, they'll just add something at the end like, also it's unique, which is worth the rest of the dollars. For the record, I consider all of this an exercise in futility. The entire point of flat rate bundled experiences like cruises or all-inclusive resorts is that by paying for everything as a lump sum, you're meant to be getting some kind of deal. The company is also getting a deal in the sense that they know none of your trip money is going to competitors and it's all going directly to them, which is why bundles like this are so common. I also think it's ridiculous that these cost breakdowns itemize so many of the amenities. You can't say a hotel room is worth $600 a night and then also itemize the cost of the customer service, the valet parking, and the snacks in the lobby, because at any good $600 a night hotel, that stuff would be included anyway. So, I promise you, I'm keeping everything in mind for my value estimate. I'm keeping in mind that the room, while tiny, is unique. I'm keeping in mind that there are interactive performers on board, that the food was yummy, that there were mini games, that we got a couple hours in the theme park, that Disney prices are inflated. I'm factoring it all in. And let me be frank. In my opinion, the experience I
thought
had
her name
worth
was Jenny.
approximately $800 total per adult. $1,000 maximum, and kids should cost less. But during Star Cruiser's entire existence, depending on whether you went in summer or winter, and depending on how many people you felt like cramming into that tiny room, you could expect to pay anywhere from 2 times to 4 times that amount. And that's just not worth it for what it was. If they had offered a hefty discount or extended the duration of the experience, I might feel differently, but they didn't, so I don't. Also, obviously, if the Star Cruiser was a cheaper experience, it wouldn't have mattered so much that the gameplay element was so unreliable. You would think of the cost as covering the underwhelming room, the nice food, and the access to the theme park rides, and the gameplay would just feel like a bonus. So you'd feel a lot more comfortable sitting it out if it wasn't your speed, and less disappointed if you tried to participate and it didn't work properly. So no, I would never say it's worth it if you can afford it. I would probably say something more like, you might have fun doing this if you're so wealthy that you don't mind being overcharged for experiences to the tune of thousands of dollars. And even within that demographic, I would still add that the people most likely to have fun at Star Cruiser would be children ages 7 to 12. Based on my own childhood playing Neopets, I believe that's the age range in which kids have the most patience for completing busy work games in exchange for meaningless
and doing
points.
stuff
I also
like
think
scanning
kids at that age
crates.
probably wouldn't be so cognizant of how little their choices were affecting their story outcomes, so they would be harder to disappoint. I
The
mean, when I
kids
was
aren't
little,
also
my mom
thinking
would
about the
play video games
prices,
and hand me a
you know?
controller that wasn't plugged in, and I had fun.
They're not like,
so
this
the Star
is
Cruiser is kind of like
costing
that.
me
I think the building is small enough with only one
$2
entrance
a
and exit
minute.
that you could pretty comfortably turn kids loose and let them run around the ship on their own, which would be a huge novelty to them. All the kids I saw around age 10 looked like they were having an incredible time, and their parents were just beaming with pride because I could tell they felt like they were super dad for setting the whole thing up. I also think the concept was broad enough that kids wouldn't even have to have an interest or familiarity with Star Wars to enjoy it. However, I would also keep in mind that kids might have an equivalent amount of fun if you book them a weekend at the Great Wolf Lodge for like $100 a person. Or if you're really determined to spend $5,000, you can just give it to them in cash and let them go ham at Chuck E. Cheese. At least that way they'd earn it all back in finger traps and novelty giant pencils. So I guess my point is that it would be truly hard to justify this expense, even if you fell within the best possible, highly specific demographic. And here's my supporting evidence. The hotel went out of business. If the value of something is what people are willing to pay, I can objectively say the Disney company charged too much for this experience because time showed that the majority of people on this earth were not willing to pay it. And yet, I should say that Star Cruiser did earn itself something of a cult following among a small number of people who went. In my time researching Star Cruiser, I noticed an interesting phenomenon throughout the fan groups. One talking point I've seen reiterated again and again is that even though Star Cruiser closed, it was a perfect product, it was too pure for this world, or the mainstream wasn't nerdy enough to appreciate it, or it wasn't advertised well enough, or it was totally worth the money, it wasn't Disney's fault, all you broke boys couldn't afford it.
this world. What the fuck does that even mean?
It was screwed by the marketing and the haters online, but actually everyone who went unanimously loved it.
I'm sorry, too nerdy for the mainstream. There are LARPing conventions, okay? I've seen some of the I remember some of the things you guys have shown me. What do you mean too nerdy for mainstream?
It's just not true. Over the year and a half the Star Cruiser was open, I saw loads of comments
Star
from people
Wars.
who were very excited to go and left extremely disappointed. And wouldn't you know it, a lot of them had the exact same issues I did. General issues with the app glitching or freezing. Character performers being too swamped to interact with. Arriving 5 minutes early to a scheduled story moment only to find that it had begun 15 minutes early and they'd missed it entirely.
Hayden,
Beginning
thank
a
you for 6
dialogue
months.
tree in the app only to get left on red by the AI, barring them from joining any storylines. Performing actions in the gameplay which didn't appear to register in their profiles. Story outcomes that seemed random. Some guests went to guest services during their trip and were able to have these issues corrected. But sometimes doing so wasted hours of an experience where every second counts. And of course there were other times when the IT department tried to help and simply wasn't able to and gave up. Plenty of people went home feeling like they had missed out on the experience and like they weren't able to properly participate in the story. The more I read, the more I
I'm telling
realized
you right
that even
now,
guests who
this food that I just got put in front of me is better than the $6,000 Star Wars weekend.
Initially said they had a great time, would later admit that the gameplay had not worked right for them. And I find this crucial to mention because, again, the gameplay is ostensibly the entire justification for the inflated price of this experience. In fact, not to put anyone on blast by playing clips, but if you watch a lot of the vlogs from people who enjoyed it, many of these people seem not to have even attempted the gameplay at all. A lot of people just took photos, hung out at the bar all day, or even did unsanctioned scavenger hunts they'd organized for their own group. And I'm not going to say none of that is fun, but how can you then say that's worth $6,000 when you could do all of that at your local Dave & Buster's? Despite the apparent frequency of the gameplay issues, whenever I saw people mention them in the fan groups, they would be quickly shouted down by other fans. They were often polite, but they would tell them that these issues were simply their own fault for somehow playing the game wrong. No one else has had these problems you're talking about, so clearly it's on you. You get what you put into it, so maybe you didn't try hard enough. You ruined your experience by trying too hard. You weren't a big enough nerd to appreciate it. You're a lying hater who's only pretending the Star Cruiser is bad, probably because you're jealous you couldn't afford it. The app doesn't do anything.
These are all Disney's alt accounts. Let's be fucking real. Some intern at Disney, which has made 15 different alt accounts, like, oh yeah, you're just not a big enough nerd.
Talk to the actors. The actors don't do anything. You need to use the app. You played the game wrong. You were supposed to pick one specific storyline to follow. You played the game wrong. You were not supposed to pick one specific storyline to follow. You must not have had an exciting enough costume. And my personal favorite, you must have the wrong personality. Finally, failing all other ways to blame the customer, people will just say, aw, it sounds like you were just unlucky. That's too bad because it was great for everyone else. And they say this as if it's acceptable for so many people to be unlucky.
Telling her she's not nerdy enough is very funny.
$6,000 experience. So I'm just preparing you, if you see any diehard fans making any of these excuses in the comments, they're not good enough. Besides, none of them even apply to me. I dressed up. I'm good at immersive games.
Look at her.
And
Look
I
at her
have possibly one of
background.
the best personalities in the world. I'm also going to go ahead and predict this now. This same demographic of people are going to see the words Star Wars Hotel in my video title and say, that just goes to show she knows nothing about it, and she probably didn't even go because she called it a hotel when it's so much more than that. Nothing she says even matters because we know she's so ignorant. They say this all the time, even though it literally is a hotel, and Disney first announced it as a hotel, and the general public knows it as the Star Wars Hotel.
Get 'em,
if I call
girl.
my video this, no one's gonna click it, are they? So I can't wait to be gatekept for calling this what everyone knows it as and what it literally is. You're probably wondering where this defensiveness
This
would
does
even come
go harder
from.
than
From
Kendrick.
them, not from me. I'm not defensive. These people didn't build the hotel with their bare hands. Why did they care if I didn't like it? Firstly, I think it's just the sunk cost fallacy. If you've invested a lot of time into being a fan of something, you feel the need to defend it unconditionally. Secondly, for profit. Many of the vocal defenders of Star Cruiser are themselves theme park vloggers or podcasters. This is a content genre whose
Turner, what?
biggest
Thank you for
selling
the
point
bits.
is often encouraging your fans to live vicariously through you as you go to Disney World every day and do experiences.
Okay, here's another thought. Paganopolis, thank you for the 3 months. I also think that there might be people who don't want to admit that they wasted $6,000 on a piece of shit immersive Star Wars hotel experience. You know how it's like this thing you'll do with your brain where you don't want to admit that? So when somebody is saying things that you know to be true, you're going to pretend that that goes along with sunk cost. Yeah, that is sunk cost fallacy, but it's not just like, oh, I spent all this money, I'm just going to try to enjoy it. It's legitimately trying to pretend as if like you're lying to yourself. Yeah, you're giving yourself cognitive dissonance because you spent so much money.
They can't afford. In this way, the better the product looks, the more successful your vlogs will be. It's also a field where early access to new offerings can make or break your channel, so people desperately want to get on the media lists, and those on it desperately want to stay on it, which doesn't happen if you're critical. Some of the foremost Star Cruiser influencers were even themselves travel agents who sold Star Cruiser packages, so one could argue that there's an even more direct monetary incentive to make it look good. But I care most about the final reason. The price of the experience has forced fans to be very defensive over their decision to go. If you book a $5,000 theme park experience and then mention it to a random coworker, they're probably going to be like, you're nuts! Everyone is talking about how this thing is way too expensive and will never be worth it. So once that's out there, you now have to enjoy this experience. Because if you go and then come home and are like, it wasn't that good, or even it was just okay, you worry that you'll look like a fool. And to that I say, I don't think any of you guys are fools. I mean, you were fooled in a literal sense, but that's not embarrassing. It's Disney that should be embarrassed for taking advantage of their fans. So, by all that I mean, no, it wasn't worth it. Part 18, why did it fail? After about 6 months of being open, that first wave of superfans and influencers who
Another
wanted to book
costume
the Galactic
change.
Star Cruiser dried up. Theme park busybodies noticed that the booking page on the website had more and more availability as time wore on. Guests visiting reported that the hotel was often running at half capacity, which was very apparent because they would cut the 2 dinner seatings down to 1, and you could still see visibly empty tables at that 1 dinner seating. Staff also started to report that their hours were being cut. Pretty much everyone following the story had correctly predicted that the Star Cruiser would see totally full bookings for only a few months while theme park news outlets and influencers got their fill, and then interest would wane. But because it was so widely predicted, everyone just assumed that Disney also expected this to happen, and they probably baked it into their initial price structure. Maybe it just cost so much because they didn't expect it to be booked all the time. And if Disney did want the hotel to be full, everyone just assumed they would adjust the prices lower, and that would bring the interest back up, and then they could reach some kind of equilibrium. But none of that ever happened. It's surprising to me how little Disney appeared to try to salvage this project. Even as sales declined, they refused to budge on the prices. They did offer some discounts in the last 6 months of operation, but those were only for Disney Visa card holders and members of their timeshare program, and even then, it was only when booking for specific dates. So yeah, it seemed like all along, Disney really had expected this hotel to keep costing over $5,000 and keep selling out. An unfathomable level of hubris, in my opinion.
Or like Haas was saying, where this project was dead in the water from the moment the foundation was laid. Because it was already seen as a loss. They knew it would be shut down before it opened. Exactly. And like I said, this was happening at the same time as Disney launching Disney Plus and spending something like $71 million acquiring $71 billion acquiring 21st Century Fox. So they were spending out the fucking ass. And then COVID happens and Disney starts, looking at all of these operating losses, and Disney Plus needed to shave like $8 billion in costs alone. And then, Bob Iger leaving Disney, even though he's back, a major internal restructuring and merger. Yes, there was so much happening at Disney. So there's no fucking way. There's no way that they looked at this and went, this is going to be one of our successful ventures. Remember, for the last decade, Disney has made most of their money from their theme parks, but that's not what this is. And the fact that it cost this much money from the get-go meant that it was never going to be able to appeal to a mass audience. So no, I am of the belief they were like, this is dead in the water, so we're just going to try to get as much money as we can out of consumers before it ends.
And when this didn't prove to be true, I predicted that Disney was going to stay the course for a few more years and then retool
Yoshi,
the story and kind of
bits.
relaunch the experience. They could reuse all the effects but set it in a new time period and have characters like Darth Vader and the Mandalorian showing up. Then the people who had already booked the first time would have incentive to come back, and they would presumably unlock a whole new demographic of people who don't care about the sequels. But nope. They decided to just throw in the towel altogether. The news of the closure was very abrupt, as in they announced it in May and it was going to happen in September. This means at the time...
Right, that's an indicator that it was dead before arrival.
The announcement, there were already dates on the booking calendar and guests had already reserved spots for dates which would now be canceled. So Disney immediately froze bookings on the website. They called any guests with existing reservations beyond the closing date and offered them either refunds or the first chance to rebook. And then once all those rebookings were done, very few spots remained for any new guests looking to book a room. And obviously there was demand for that because a lot of people were kind of curious about the Star Cruiser but thought they would have forever to decide to go. When they reopened booking to the public, all the remaining reservations were booked in a matter of hours. So as you can see, the last-minute announcement of the closure screwed over both Disney and the fans. If Disney had announced a pending closure and given everybody like a year to get their fill of Star Cruiser, they probably would have been booked up that whole year. By closing it as suddenly as they did, they were leaving money on the table. This also seemed to be a snap decision. In March of 2023, Disney announced that instead of offering as many consecutive cruises as possible, running one after the other, they would start to offer only 2 bookings per week, with 3 days in between.
That was the internal
where
consensus.
the
We were told to
Star
just
Cruiser
slap
sat
some
empty.
pay
When
on it,
they
call it
announced
done, that it was
they
transferred
said
over the
schedule
operational
change
team.
would take effect in October 2023. They even rolled out this new calendar on the booking website. So clearly at that point, they didn't yet anticipate that in October of 2023, the Star Cruiser would no longer exist. New merchandise products popped up in the gift shop throughout the final year, like this action figure of the AI droid from the console in the guest rooms. This didn't even become available until July of 2023. In early May of 2023, guests of the hotel reported seeing executives and Imagineers visiting the Star Cruiser. One assumes this must have been to assess how things were running or consider improvement.
Haas worked on it. Wait, you don't know that Haas is Mr. John Disney? We got Mr. John Disney himself.
Maybe in hindsight, that could have been a sign of trouble in that the Imagineers could have been brainstorming ways to try to save it, but it doesn't feel like something they would bother with if they already knew the closure was imminent. And yet, the permanent closure was announced just 2 weeks after that visit. Executives obviously chose the abrupt closure date because the fiscal year ended on September 30th, and Disney's plan was to write the entire hotel off as a loss. The loss of the hotel would bring in a $300 million tax break, and they wanted it for that year. So in my opinion, the reasons the Star Cruiser failed were obvious. From the moment it was announced, everyone predicted it would fail. The marketing sucked, not a lot of people even understood what it really was. It was way too expensive, to an extent that the only buzz it received was mockery of the price tag, and this is all a surprise to no one. So, I think the more constructive question is, why couldn't it be saved? The Star Cruiser was a project with so many fatal flaws, I think it would have been very difficult to salvage. Built by a company so confident in their inability to fail that they left no flexibility for adjustments down the line. The biggest obstacle to this experience's marketability was the ridiculous cost. So, one of the most obvious moves to save the project would have been to lower the cost. Unfortunately, while building it, Disney was so confident in their ability to command a high price that they blocked off most avenues to ever do so. The physical building itself was constructed with very high prices in mind. It has only 100 rooms with a maximum occupancy of about 500 guests. The atrium is built to accommodate that number of guests with very little wiggle room. The only dining room can hold half the capacity of guests and relies on 2 separate dinner seating times with staggered lunches and breakfasts. Any hotel in the world has a baseline cost to run just by existing. A minimum number of cleaners, servers, and concierge you need on staff, a baseline cost to keep the lights on, and in this case, they're also paying the actors. Disney is accustomed to high profits on all their hotels, so with only 100 rooms, they would need to charge a lot per room just to make it worth their while. But they can't simply add more rooms to lower the average cost, because then they'd need to do a total overhaul of the rest of the structure. Common areas, such as the atrium, the lounge, the activity rooms, the landings on each floor, are fairly small. There are only 2 elevators with which to navigate between
planning
floors,
from the beginning.
and only 1 functional elevator through which to access the lobby. I know it looks like there are 2, but reportedly the left elevator is actually just a dummy elevator. It's a maintenance access door. The atrium can hold the current maximum occupancy of hotel guests, but when it does, it feels pretty crowded. They rely on the gameplay a lot of the time to disperse the crowds into different areas of the ship, so you don't know.
I left the project pretty early on. I remember coworkers being made fun of for being assigned to work on a failed project that no one would ever see. Fuck.
Notice how physically small it is. So they can't drop the price without adding more rooms, but they can't add more rooms without remodeling the bulk of the building to make a bigger atrium, bigger lounge, probably several additional dining rooms unless guests are willing to eat dinner at very odd times. And for the record, I'm not telling you all this to justify Disney's prices. This is an unsolvable problem, but it was entirely, voluntarily of Disney's making. But as it stands, they've got these problems baked directly into the loaf, and there's no easy solution. So if they can't add more rooms to drop the price, they could sweeten the deal by lengthening the voyage, even if for 1 additional day. But no, they can't do that either. They've already got a tricky situation with the character-driven story elements in that the character performers are limited to 8-hour shifts. In case you didn't pick up on it, they solved this problem on day 1 by having you arrive in the late afternoon, and on day 2 by sending you into the theme park for half the day. That's right, the theme park excursion was just a distraction. I know you didn't notice at the time because the gameplay was so compelling, but if they added a 3rd day, how would they distract you then. I personally would have appreciated downtime, but if everyone has downtime simultaneously, we've run back into the issue of both the rooms and the common areas being far too small. Another easily preventable issue. I've seen a lot of people saying maybe now that it failed, they'll just get rid of the roleplay element and open as a normal hotel. But they can't! Every other Disney hotel offers constantly running shuttle buses, taking guests to and from the theme parks and shopping center. Disney never bothered implementing this service for the Star Cruiser because they assume you're going to stay all day, and then also because it would have cost more money. But if the hotel isn't a LARP experience, one assumes you're going to spend most of your day outside. The problem is, the Star Cruiser was built backstage of one of their theme parks. Remember, security had to stop our taxi at the gate and check everyone's IDs before we could approach? Doing this with a full bus of tired theme park guests all coming back at once after the fireworks show would be possible, but it would also be a logistical nightmare and an additional expense. Finally, the Star Cruiser lacks basic amenities all the other Disney hotels provide, like a pool and a fitness center, and you'll recall that the rooms are very small. This means that without the roleplay elements, not only would the hotel not command a very high price—
They're like, these are Star Wars fans, again.
Tag, it would
What's for
reasonably
dinner?
be valued lower
Pizza
than any
and a
other hotel on
sandwich.
property. The
So
only way to balance
carbs.
out low room value would be to add a lot more rooms, and now we're back to all the problems with the building that I just told you about. Funnily enough, if you do want to stay at a version of the Star Cruiser that's just a hotel, you can still do that. In 2022, French theme park Futuroscope opened the Hotel Station Cosmos, which looks suspiciously familiar. A room there will run you about $250 a night, and they're actually bigger than the rooms in Star Cruiser. Aesthetically, the decor is so similar to Star Cruiser, it feels legally actionable, in my opinion. So it's very funny to me that the Hotel Station Cosmos was the one to stand the test of time. As for the physical remains of the Star Cruiser, in a 2023 interview, Parks Chairman Josh D'Amaro assured fans that something would be done with it after the closure. But he gave no indication as to what, which to me says that he didn't actually know and also probably was lying. If I had to look to the future of the hotel, here's my theory. I think they might open it up as an expensive dining location. You know, guests will make dinner reservations, check in at the gate in Star Wars Land, and then board the spaceship-themed buses to the hotel. But they'd probably have to build more of these, or a bigger bus to accommodate everybody arriving at once. I acknowledge that the guests having to be transported by bus is an extreme hassle, but it's not practical to have people driving up, and it's not walkable from anywhere, so I don't think there's anything else they could do for that element. When guests arrive, the wings of the building containing the hotel rooms will either be blocked off and used for storage, or demolished and converted back to parking lot space. The command bridge will be a photo op, the lightsaber training pod will be closed, because I can't think of a way for them to incorporate it while still putting through a high volume of people. Guests will eat in the dining room, they will watch a live singer, which they will all be able to see, because they will no longer be seating people in the corner booths. Will they, Disney? Will they? And then the alarm will sound, they'll be told the ship has been boarded by the First Order, and go to the atrium to watch an abridged version of the finale. Basically just the Rey and Kylo Ren fight, using the special effects that are already installed. While they're watching the finale, a new group of guests is entering the dining room. Rinse and repeat 3 to 4 times per night. And then they charge probably approaching $200 per person for the experience. Adults get 1 alcoholic beverage for free, and then it's like $99 for kids. The only other possible outcome is that it'll sit abandoned, growing mold. They'll use the dining room to host manager meetings or maybe new hire training seminars, and the hotel rooms for storage of bubble wands and balloons. That's the latest.
We had so many meetings with the internal safety engineering team because so many of the things the creative directors wanted were hazards to the guests. Also, the worry that guests with lightsabers might step in at any time, try to be the hero, but gave them an aneurysm. They're like, we cannot be dealing with these nerds, okay? Nerds, they might drink so much blue milk. We don't know what will happen.
Easiest solution, so that feels the most likely to me. Maybe that's what Josh meant by something. Part 19, the cast members. Cast member usually refers to actors, but in Disney vernacular, it's every employee.
Part 19.
And I just wanted to do a section on this to say, anytime the Star Cruiser felt deluxe to me, anytime I felt they had gone above and beyond to give a good experience, it was entirely through the efforts of individual cast members.
See,
it's
she's
kind of like
giving
that line from Jurassic Park where John Hammond
she's
says
giving
they spared
props
no
to the
expense.
cast members.
In this case, I felt like Disney spared lots
There's
of
a
expenses.
whole section on them.
Too many. But by contrast, I felt that the cast members spared no effort. I would like to think that maybe Disney paid them well above the going rate to reflect this extra level of service they provided, but I know in my heart they probably didn't. They were probably just like, you'll earn more in tips, you're lucky to work here. Which, if true, boo! Anyway, Okay, let's highlight a few examples. In most cases, I was trying not to film people's faces unless they were a character performer, but I'll show footage where I have it. The merchandise cast members were so fun. This guy gave me a whole in-character guided tour of the store and everything in it, and he told me in character about how he runs a Gaia fan club on his homeworld, and then we talked a little about how we were both from Coruscant.
I am the biggest Gaia fan in the whole galaxy.
What's your favorite song?
My favorite song? Probably Hynenea or Coaxia.
Hynenea's classic.
Yes, yeah.
The next day I had a long conversation with these two gift shop cast members about stuff that was happening around the ship. They were really funny.
You don't think it's a stowaway?
Again, Wookiee 7 feet tall, super hard.
Right, how would they do
super
that?
Hard to hide. They would leave fur everywhere. I think if we actually had a Wookiee, I would notice. We would have noticed already.
I kept coming back to look at the jewelry display because they were all sold out, and one of the cast members actually got manager approval to sell me the display model, so I got the very last one on the ship. This cast member in Batu had customized his own outfit for a little shoulder porg. On our first visit to the lounge, our waitress brought out our drinks, and then also brought out a little dish of water for Skippy to drink. And the other employees behind the bar were really setting a great mood.
I'm sorry, I can't get over people trying to comment and say that Jenny's not nerdy enough. Are you seeing this shit?
They knew all the alien songs playing over the speakers and were singing and dancing along. Our waiter Miguel at both dinners remembered our drink orders and had them waiting for us when we arrived the second night. He also told us the in-universe details about all the food and brought me that extra Mustafarian cheese. I went out into the atrium at night to film it while it was empty. I asked if I could step up on one of the little benches, and obviously I couldn't. I don't know why I asked. But then while I was filming, the cast member disappeared and came back with a little step stool to stand on instead. It was so nice. Now, this isn't really exclusive to Star Cruiser. I think Disney cast members tend to be this enthusiastic and helpful across the board, but it was an integral part of the experience, so I still think it's worth remarking upon. I should also mention that for the opening team, the vast majority of the Star Cruiser's hospitality staff were apparently kids doing the Disney college program.
Today, we are going to surprise some of our college program
Here's to the cast members, here's to the Juilliard grads.
Team of the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser. I'm so excited, there's a lot of good energy.
This means that they were young workers, juggling shifts with classes. For many of them, this was probably their first job ever in their entire lives. With such a new product and so many moving parts, they must have been...
No joke. One thing that a lot of musically theater trained graduates from very prestigious schools will go do is stuff like this or cruise ships. So I don't know if you guys know who Average Jonas is, but he performed on cruise ships for a long time. But I have friends who are like tried out for Broadway, couldn't make it on Broadway, and then got hired on a cruise liner or got hired at Disney. And so that's what they do, you know, hoping then that they make the step up to being on off Broadway or on Broadway. Wasn't Cutie a performer? Did she like wait? I thought it was a one-time thing. I've seen the Britney Spears performance. She wasn't like a performer though, right? She did like a whole cruise. What? No, she was hired. She did it more than once. She's another person who I'm like, how many lives have you lived?
Constantly
between the two
issues.
of us.
And given the cost of the experience, the emotional stakes would have been much higher. So with that in mind, I think it's even more admirable that they did such a good job. But I also think it was really unfair of Disney to put them in that position in the first place. It's also weird because, like, that must have been a cost-cutting measure, right? College program is part-time, it doesn't come with health benefits, and the kids are housed by Disney, the cost of which is deducted from their paycheck. On top of all that, they have a lower base pay than regular employees. What's worse,
I've seen her
allegedly
performance
Star Cruiser
video.
invented a work position called roamer. This would be a catch-all role responsible for pretty much every task in the hotel. Concierge, food, housekeeping, and bell services, or as I like to call it, smuggling luggage. This structure is obviously beneficial to employers, making
Bro,
each
she said the same
individual
thing we were
employee
saying.
more expendable, and also ensuring you can pack as many tasks into a single shift as possible. Requiring a single job position to juggle so many different responsibilities would of course command a higher hourly rate. But not if you hire a bunch of students who are new to the hospitality industry.
Shocking
who have no
Disney
basis
did
for
this.
comparison and can't tell when you're asking too much of them. And sure enough, of the 80 or so cast members hired onto this roamer job, allegedly only about 10 were full-time experienced workers, with the rest being college program students. The other issue is, and I'm not saying that the college program students provide worse service than other employees, But they're indisputably the cheapest labor available to Disney. So here again, why was Disney so determined to take the cheapest route on every aspect of the Star Cruiser? Anyway, I just hope that none of these people found themselves out of a job because of Disney's incompetence in launching this doomed hotel. But in my experience, when attractions close, Disney just shuffles the cast members to other locations around the resort, so they're probably okay. But sadly, I can't assume the same is true for the character performers. They had an especially difficult job, not comparable to anything else in the theme parks. They had to memorize collective hours worth of scenes and work in 2-day blocks where they were on stage for 8-hour shifts each day. They also had to familiarize themselves with the schedule to ensure they were at the right place at the right time, and be skilled at improv, and retain information like guest names and relationships to the characters. Despite all this, these actors allegedly had the exact same rates as other performers around the parks. These salaries aren't public information, so maybe that's just a rumor, but that is the word on the street from people who allege to be the employees.
That's why
so
actors
true,
at
Croy
theme
takes on this
parks
massive
are
workload for Star Cruiser,
unionizing.
only to make the exact same rate as Gaston, who must only memorize 2 songs for a 30-minute stage show.
That's bullshit, man.
That's part
When
of why I
I
get so
was
miffed
a
at people
lad, I
insisting
heat
that
no
yes, the
dozen
Star Cruiser
eggs.
price is fair because it's exactly like a bunch of Broadway shows in a row. It's not, but also, do you think your money is going directly to Captain Kevin? Do you think she's getting paid as much per day as a lead in a Broadway show makes for several
No.
performances? Because I don't. And after all this, these actors were the first to be punished when the Star Cruiser underperformed. Actors are cast
And
with goals in
again,
mind.
because Broadway actors are an actor's equity. They are guaranteed a certain amount of pay per week for a certain amount of weeks because of their union.
So they aren't as easy to reassign as a housekeeping employee. So instead, they were allegedly hit with waves of layoffs.
You only get
First,
paid
when
more
the
if your
staffing
acting
was
job
scaled
at Disney
back due to
involves
lower
hazardous
demand,
scenes.
and then again when the Star Cruiser was closed completely. And I realized that
If
this is
you'll
sort of the nature
almost
of
die,
acting as a
we'll pay you
profession.
a
It's
little
not the
more.
most stable job, but when the Star Cruiser did close, it did so very abruptly. Reportedly, a lot of the main character performers were hired on a year-long contractual basis, at which point their contracts may or may not be renewed. So they probably had a long-term expectation of when they'd be out of a job, and they probably didn't expect it to be in September of 2023. Allegedly, when the decision to close the Star Cruiser was made, the cast were given very little warning, only finding out
Classic.
they would be losing their jobs in a staff meeting a handful of minutes before the media announcement and just before starting a long shift. Even though so much was asked of them and they really rose to the occasion, I feel like the cast members were the first ones thrown under the bus when the Star Cruiser failed
Classic.
through no fault of their own. And that feels bad. Part 20. You've been robbed. I'm not talking about the cost of the cruise. If I was, this section would have been called, I've been robbed. No, you've been robbed. We've been robbed, all of us. I mentioned way back in part 1 that Disney has been marketing the idea of themed immersive experiences for years. And one they pitched as immersive was Star Wars Galaxy's
sister.
Edge. I said that, but then I changed the subject. I put a pin in it, but I didn't tell you about the pin. It was a surprise. Like when you step on a pin. Pandora, the World of Avatar was pitched as immersive, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge was pitched as immersive, and at the end of the day, they're both about equally immersive. They both have large set pieces with really tall structures, they both have rides, they both have themed food and themed merchandise, and in the case of Pandora, that is roughly what was promised. But when they announced Galaxy's Edge, they promised much more. It was meant to be the most immersive theme park land ever built, unlike anything you've seen before. Encounters that enhance the story, roaming droids, and aliens you can interact with.
This new 14-acre land will be occupied by many inhabitants, humanoids, aliens, and droids.
Now, the inhabitants of this remote frontier town, one of the last stops before wild space, will operate every store and restaurant. This outpost is filled with characters, alien creatures, and droids. Now, you might have seen a favorite little droid rolling around in that video, and yes, BB-8 is one of the characters you can find there. Each experience will literally be out of this world, like this big fellow up here.
A personal reputation score that follows you throughout the land and impacts your day.
For you, our guest, every encounter will bring more of the Star Wars story to life in the place. You can explore like never before. This is a living place, a place where your choices matter, and a place where you can even earn a reputation. Each guest is successful when they complete their mission.
Harco, whoever that is.
You might even end up on the list of a local bounty hunter. I hear that Harco's here is someone you particularly don't want to mess with. If your name ends up on his list, well, that might truly be a problem when you show up at the local cantina.
Early plans featured a dinner show venue called the Kalikori Club, and some of the concept art is available to the public in the Galaxy's Edge art book. During construction, they appear to have cleared the land necessary for the Kalikori Club.
What do you do, sexual
before
harassment?
pulling back at the last minute and building the much smaller cantina, leaving the extra plot of land as a parking lot backstage. In 2017, Imagineers test drove interactive droids around Tomorrowland for a couple days, then abandoned that project as well. In 2023, they rolled out these little two-legged guys, but they immediately said they were only going to be used for special events and would not be a permanent
If you walk around the
fixture,
land, you can
and
easily
called them,
identify
like,
the
an
areas where budget was
experiment.
cut,
And to me, it
doors
was
that
just
don't open,
code
empty
for, we built this to
stage, or
impress
areas filled
shareholders,
with
and you're not
crates.
going to see them on the regular. Once in a blue moon, you
So
can catch
many
an R2-D2
crates. Are you supposed to
rolling
scan
around,
them?
But I've been told that that droid is actually the same model that's for sale in the adjacent Droid Depot gift shop, so that's really just a product demo. In 2014,
Hey, why don't we?
before Galaxy's Edge was even
I can't get over the fucking crate thing. Like, hey, yo, okay, here's an idea, right? We tell him we just need him to scan these crates, all right? I'm sure it'll work. We can get people to scan the crates. They're like, you really think people will spend $6,000 to scan some crates? Yeah, come on, just tell them it's part of the game. Tell them it's part of the app, and they'll just scan crates all day long. Yeah, just keep scanning them.
Two limited-time interactive games. The first was Legends of Frontierland. The story of the game was that two different factions were fighting for territory in
Just
Western
keep scanning
Goldtown.
crates.
As a player, you had to choose which territory to support and
Why
buy
are
land
they
for your
Tony
side. You could
Soprano?
earn wooden nickels in a lot of different ways.
Hey, I'm
running
doing business
errands for
here.
characters, gambling at the saloon, or turning in a fugitive for a bounty. At the end of each day, a winner would be announced based on guest input, and the stakes would be raised by having character actors on each side of the conflict who you would interact with during your missions. These actors would then lead the day-end finale ceremony. In Adventureland, they had the Adventure Trading Company, which worked on a different system. You would pay money for a particular quest, and then at the end, you would win a tangible item. These little
The average
totems,
IQ
which
of
were said to
theme
have
park
mystical
guests are
properties.
surprisingly
Some were really
low.
simple to get, like you would just buy a themed food and an item came with it. But others were much more involved. You'd pay for the quest in a gift shop, be handed an activity booklet, and then go around Adventureland looking for solutions to various puzzles, like decoding the ancient writing in the Indiana
sky
Jones
real?
temple, or talking to the Jungle Cruise skippers to complete a training course. Then you'd bring the completed booklet back to claim your prize. Both games were well received
What do you
by
think?
guests, and Imagineers later confirmed that they were both actually covert playtests for possible interactive elements at the forthcoming Galaxy's Edge. But when the land opened, neither concept was present. The only gameplay that materialized was the Star Wars Datapad app game, which we've all agreed sucks. And what gets me about the app game is you can very much see echoes of Legends of Frontierland in it, but it's an incomplete game. You complete tasks to earn in-game money, but instead of tasks that incorporate the environment, you're just scanning QR codes and then completing repetitive puzzles on your phone. And you can't do anything with the money. You can hack the control panels and ships for the resistance, and you might be rewarded with a feeble beeping sound effect, but there's never any consequence to what you've done. This is all speculation, but I'd imagine that all of this was meant to culminate in the same way as Legends of Frontierland. Guests would earn points or territory for either the First Order or the Resistance, and then at the end of the day, they could have actors come out, and in a story moment, they would reveal who had won. But if that was the plan, it was never implemented, probably because Disney is trying to cut back on actors to
here's
save
the
money.
plan.
So instead you feel like you're playing half a game, or like a third of a game.
Crates.
Very little of a game. And no reputation score either. No roleplay element. Instead of filling the land with character actors, the CEO realized it would be cheaper to just tell the cashiers and food service workers that they get to be part of the story by using in-universe vernacular. And then brag about how revolutionary it is that everyone in the land is in character, even though they're not being compensated for the extra labor and guests are getting a lesser experience. Even elsewhere in their parks, Disney has started laying off most of the live performers who used to sing and dance because they were deemed too expensive. Only characters who do photo ops are safe because Mickey Mouse and Cinderella directly earn their keep by selling Genie Plus front-of-the-line access and PhotoPass digital photo packages. Looking through the Star Wars Land art book, there's so much art for interactive alien citizens, and none of those made it to opening.
Feels
I was
bad.
especially surprised to see this female Rhodian character. It seems that even a costume like Guani was originally intended for the theme park, but scrapped for budgetary reasons. Every promised feature that would have made Star Wars Land unique was cut, not because any of it would have been impossible to implement, but because each one would have cost Disney just a little bit extra. Roaming droids cost money to repair. Actors, puppeteers, singers, they all cost marginally more per hour than a food service worker because they have better unions. You can build a game into the land, but any pieces that move or interact, well, there go more maintenance costs. And if you want the app game to culminate in anything, that would probably be a skit, and that would mean more actors. Why build a bigger restaurant with more square footage when you can instead save money by making making a smaller building and enacting a rule where guests have to leave after 40 minutes. Who cares if it's a worse experience? You'll still get their money. Why have a singer at the cantina? We already covered how singers are expensive. So what do we ultimately get at Galaxy's Edge? A themed courtyard, themed food, rides, and gift shops. The barest minimum expectations for a theme park land. It's no more impressive than anything they were building 50 years ago, just physically much bigger and emptier. And guest feedback has reflected this, with many calling the land a highly themed shopping mall with little to do. Then, less than 3 years after the underwhelming opening of Galaxy's Edge, they roll out the Galactic Star Cruiser. The hotel contains everything that was promised in that first announcement for Galaxy's Edge. A roaming droid, an interactive alien, character actors, reputation score, app integration, a dinner show with an alien singer named Gaia. In fact, if you look back at the concept art for the Calicori Club, you'll see that it actually appears to have an identical layout to the dining room on the Galactic Star Cruiser, just reskinned in clean colors. Over at the sides, you can even see those poles that blocked my view. And not only did the hotel cost extra, it cost a lot extra. More than any hotel Disney had ever offered before. Incomparable to the pricing structure for any themed entertainment ever offered by any company.
And the thing too, not only was the price point so prohibitive, it's Star Wars. I know Star Wars is big. Okay, I know Star Wars is big. But this is not like a generic, really immersive thing but you've got options. No, you have to either be a fucking diehard Star Wars fan to want something like that, or be sold on the pitch of like this being more immersive than going to Disney. I don't know. I truly, this is not something that appeals to me, but it's also something that I know won't appeal to most people. And so that means that this is an incredibly niche product, very expensive to operate. It's small, it's niche, and they decided to move forward with this project. And then at I can't tell you exactly, but around the same time, they were dealing with internal issues, they had, political strife, issues with Disney Plus, spending so much money on Disney Plus content because they were competing with Netflix when they should have just stuck with their bread and butter. Disney's bread and butter has always been theme parks, but they looked at the streaming wars, they looked at Netflix and went, no, we're gonna do Netflix. And guess what? They fucking lost, okay? They are in a serious shithole right now. And then on top of that, employee layoffs. And so it was just a total garbage storm, and there was no way this was going to succeed.
He likes to pretend that Galaxy's Edge was never supposed to be more than it is, that it was always meant to be complemented by the Galactic Star Cruiser.
What's pretty amazing is to think about being in the rooms, seeing concept art years ago while we're building Galaxy's Edge with this in mind.
But I haven't forgotten the truth. Galaxy's Edge was publicly announced in August 2015 and promised all of these features to guests, complete with concept art. If the Galactic Star Cruiser was always part of the plan and developed simultaneously, why wasn't it announced at the same time? Why didn't they clarify then that the land's coolest features would exist only as DLC for the hotel guests? It wasn't until April 2017 that Disney distributed those first market research surveys about a Star Wars hotel. And at that point, from the concept art they released with the survey, we can see that they didn't know what the building was going to look like yet, didn't know what it was going to cost, didn't have a full picture of it. So, no, it doesn't really seem to me like the Galactic Star Cruiser was always part of the plan, intended as a complement to Galaxy's Edge.
People find out the parking lot next to the hotel. Wait until people find out the parking lot next to the hotel costs more to build than the hotel. Oh my God, all of this Haas intel.
Galaxy's Edge, and logistically figured out the technology and budget it needed. And then someone internally seems to have said, wait, what if we just take away all the coolest parts and put them in a big locked building, and to get into that building, people have to give us a lot more money?
I think the depth of storytelling, the amount of play, the amount of engagement that a person is going to experience, I don't think you're going to question the cost. I actually think you're just going to have a lot of fun.
I also find find it notable that the Disney parks used to have a popular interactive children's show called Jedi Training Academy, which predated even the opening of Galaxy's Edge. Kids would put on little robes and be handed training lightsabers, run through a number of drills, and then face off against a dark side opponent. Kids liked to do it, and adults liked to watch it because it was cute. The last remaining version of that show was canceled in June 2020, probably due to the pandemic, but even after Disney World started relaxing all its COVID precautions, the show never returned. Months later, the experience disappeared altogether from the website, and in July of 2022, they quietly removed all physical signage from the park. And so I think it's interesting that here we see a similar experience, again moved behind the paywall of the Galactic Star Cruiser. This isn't only a pattern in the Star Wars part of the parks either. This has become the new philosophy of the Disney theme parks. More and more amenities that used to be free are now being put behind paywalls. I told you about the M-bands earlier and how they've had this technology at the hotels for a while. Well, you used to get a Magic Band free with a hotel booking to use as your room key, but now they make you buy them. The Fast Pass system used to be free, now it costs extra. And it doesn't include every ride anymore. The good rides are a la carte, you have to buy those separately. Meanwhile, lines keep getting longer and longer because now
Disney
that Disney
Plus
can
just keeps
monetize long
raising
lines,
their
corporate
prices.
actually wants them to be long. The Fast Passes actually have variable pricing, which is updated live in the app, so the longer the lines are, the more they can charge. And of course, they oversell the Fast Passes because now they have an incentive to do so, so those lines aren't even actually short anymore. They fire all the atmosphere and entertainment and close all the little diversions because they'd rather everybody just pile into those lines because the longer the lines, the more they can charge. Why build new rides? Why increase capacity? It's actually better for your bottom line if you don't anymore. Why do anything above the bare minimum? Ride photos used to be free for pass holders, now they cost extra. Buses from the airport used to be free for Disney hotel guests, now they cost extra. Even the baskets of free bread they used to bring out at the expensive restaurants, now you have to buy those as an appetizer. So that's the dirty secret behind the Galactic Star Cruiser.
You gotta buy the bread.
It wasn't an idea conceived to explore a new frontier in immersive experiences.
Buy the
It was just
bread.
a lot of ideas they already had already promised us, some which they had already implemented, which were then taken away, paywalled. It wasn't driven by curiosity or inspiration. It was born of pure
Disney bread
greed.
pass.
Disney's boldest experiment in exorbitant upcharges. The Disney parks have always been more expensive than their direct competition.
Trinity, thank you
even
for
when
the 9
parks like
months.
Universal Orlando started to roll out equally impressive attractions. And the reason people were willing to pay more for Disney was that even though the base cost was more expensive, all of those little amenities were included, and that made people feel good. And now people go, they pay the high base cost, and then they pay all the little extra costs. Because really, why have an expensive, mediocre vacation when you can have an extra expensive, adequate vacation? They've already bought in, they might as well pay extra, but when they pay extra, they feel bad about it. And in some ways, this business model has been successful because, like I said, people are buying the amenities. Everybody's buying the Magic Bands and the bread baskets. Everybody's getting that Fast Pass add-on. And in some cases, they're paying extra to ride individual rides.
Things
and
are
Disney
going
is
to get
super happy
worse.
because they get more money. Who cares how people feel if they're still giving Disney the money? I'm not going to pretend Disney is a smile factory. Obviously, they've always been a for-profit business at the end of the day. But I have to wonder what the long-term implications of this business model will be. The Thompson family might fly in from Iowa for their trip in 2024 and discover that they need to shell out extra money to go on the rides that they want and begrudgingly do so. But will that make them want to come back in 2027? The profits are high now, but what will they look like in 3 to 5 years? Maybe Disney doesn't care about that. Maybe if you set the price high enough, you can afford to have every family on Earth come only one time.
We've got Disney at home.
Feel kind of bad about their trip and never return. Or maybe Disney's right and they're too big to fail and people won't like it, but they'll just keep coming back and paying more and more for the same old things that used to be free and feeling worse and worse about it. But I personally believe that eventually, if Disney doesn't course correct, they're going to hit a ceiling. And I think the Galactic Star Cruiser was only the first symptom of that. I think it felt the strain first because it was so much more expensive. It was the ultimate monument to this age of Disney inflation, a singular product we can all point to as the moment Disney's new, more hostile business strategy became so painfully obvious. The very first time a luxury cruise ship has ever been symbolic of the hubris of man. And this isn't to say that along the way there weren't individual artists and actors and employees who were inspired and did give it their all. I feel sad for their sake that all their work has been for nothing. I even feel sad for this building, thinking of it sitting empty and sad, gathering dust, maybe used as storage or a corporate meeting space. It's haunting. It was a unique experience, and now it will be gone, and that's sad. But that doesn't mean it was worth the price. It doesn't even mean it was good. In fact, if the Galactic Star Cruiser had had succeeded, it would have only emboldened Disney to keep charging more and offering less. It's a project that might have been catastrophic on a consumer level for the future of Disney parks, and for that reason, it deserved to fail, and I'm glad it's dead. Also, I'm still mad they sat me behind a pole.
Wow. Holy shit. I'm gonna be honest.
It wasn't much of a cruise ship.
I'm gonna be honest. That felt long just because there was so much info, but I would not have known we just watched 4 hours on a topic that I didn't think I would have cared about, like the Star Wars hotel. That was amazing. Amazing. That speaks to the ability of the creator to not just cover a topic that I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way, where they're like, oh, I would not have cared about this at all, but to cover it for 4 hours. 4